Chapter 820. Qin Shuk said with a look of pity, I see. Can't we do it secretly? Feng Ling's expression remained the same. The rules of the base are obeyed. Nothing can be done secretly. Seeing such a serious expression, Qin Shuk immediately pulled a long face and said, It seems that I should ask cousin Mingzhu to pursue Li Nanheng as soon as possible. When he becomes my cousin-in-law, it will be much easier for me to get familiar with the people in the base. Now I can't even ask for your number. How can it be so strict? It's really too strict. Feng Ling's eyes remained unchanged, but she looked at her steadily. Who is cousin Mingzhu? What do you mean by cousin-in-law? It was rare to see this little fresh meat who was indifferent to everything in front of her seem to be interested in something, so Qin Shuk directly answered, Cousin Mingzhu is my aunt's daughter. Your boss Li Nanheng is my cousin's fiancé and will marry my cousin in the future. So I said he will be my future cousin-in-law. Feng Ling glanced at her again. Is that so? Yes, don't you know that your boss Li had an engagement with the Feng family when he was very young? Oh, yes, your base is usually so strict. I don't think he will casually say this kind of private thing, but he will definitely marry my cousin in the future. Madame Feng listened behind. She should explain that Li Nanheng had cancelled the engagement with her eldest daughter, Mingzhu, but seeing that Feng Ling seemed to have a rare interaction with Qin Shuk, and Shuk seemed to like him very much, she simply didn't interrupt. Feng Ling's eyes paused on Qin Shuk for a moment. She didn't know what kind of strange emotion suddenly sank in her heart, but she instinctively wanted to confirm whether her words were true or false. After looking at her for a moment, when Qin Shuk blinked at her with a smile, Feng Ling expressionlessly looked away and returned to the bed to sit down. Seeing that Feng Ling's complexion looked normal except for a little pale, and seeing that Feng Ling's pace when returning to the ward was very steady, Qin Shuk simply pulled the chair by the bed to sit down and reached out to pick up the phone by the bed. Miss Qin, have you forgotten what I just said? Feng Ling reminded her. Qin Shuk did want to use Feng Ling's phone to call her again so that she could remember the number, but seeing Feng Ling's serious expression, she could only put the phone back. Then I don't want your cell phone number. Can you tell me your name? Qin Shuk's eyes were shining. Anyway, she refused to do it so easily. Feng Ling was a little helpless. After Boss Li's advice last time, she also knew that this little girl named Qin Shuk must have fallen in love with someone else. Not to mention that Feng Ling didn't have any plans to fall in love with anyone at all. Besides, how could two women fall in love? Don't be so silent all the time. Seeing that she intended to continue to hide her identity, Qin Shuk hurriedly reached out to grab Feng Ling's hand, but Feng Ling reacted quickly and instantly moved her hand away. In the end, Qin Shuk could only catch a corner of her sleeve. This scene made Mrs. Feng, Qin Qiu, who was sitting on the sofa, feel a little pitiful. Qin Qiu sighed softly. Shuk, it's not the first time you've seen this little brother. He seems to be so introverted. He can't stand the pestering of a crazy girl like you. Come here obediently. Don't pester him. Qin Shuk sat there unwillingly. She grabbed Feng Ling's sleeve and looked up at the beautiful and calm young man sitting on the bed. She whispered pleadingly, then, tell me your name. I definitely won't pester you. Otherwise, I'll be curious to death. Probably seeing Feng Ling's scruples, Mrs. Feng got up and came over. She was about to speak when out of the corner of her eye, she suddenly caught a glimpse of the patient number and medical records at the end of the bed. When she glanced at Feng Ling's name, she was stunned and her eyes fell on Feng Ling's face again. Your surname is Feng. Qin Qiu stared at her face firmly. Because of Mrs. Qin's gaze, Feng Ling turned to look at her and glanced at the medical records at the end of the bed. Since this was the case, there was nothing to hide, so she said lightly, yes, it's a coincidence. My surname is also Fong. Qin Qiu's eyes trembled, and then she looked at her name again. When she saw the line Fengling and the surname of male, age 16, the excitement in her eyes faded a little. Feng Ling. Which Ling? Ling as in Ling. Feng Ling. Qin Qiu looked at her face. At this moment, because Feng Ling was sitting upright by the bed, her collar was closed, and her collarbone and skin under the collar could not be seen. However, Qin Qiu had a vague feeling a very, very strong feeling. In the United States, especially in Los Angeles, there are not many Chinese surnamed Feng. There are only a few families who often have contact with our Feng family, but why don't I know you, Mrs. Feng? I am an orphan. My name was just temporarily given to me by the person who adopted me, so I'm not sure what my surname should be, Feng Ling explained simply. This kind of coincidence can only be regarded as a coincidence. I don't even know who my parents are, let alone what their surnames are. Qin Qiu's words were interrupted by Feng Ling's cold words. Her expression froze and her eyes couldn't help but dim. I see. Feng Ling. Qin Shuk blinked. Feng Ling, right? What a nice name. It sounds cold and cool. It matches your temperament very well. Feng Ling. Because of this name, Qin Qiu found an opportunity to chat with Feng Ling for a while, but she couldn't get any information from Feng Ling. Qin Shuk always interjected, and the topic was intermittent. In the end, they talked about why Feng Ling was hospitalized. When she learned that Feng Ling was accidentally injured when on a mission in 11 Base, she didn't ask more. After all, she knew that the matters of 11 Base were confidential, and she really shouldn't keep embarrassing this little boy. Qin Qiu asked Qin Shuk to go downstairs to buy some fruit. Qin Shuk got up and was about to go out to buy it. Even if Feng Ling tried to stop her, she couldn't persuade them. Chapter 821. Feng Ling didn't understand what Mrs. Feng meant, so she just raised her head and looked at her seriously. What do you want to ask, Mrs. Feng? Are you really a boy? Madame Feng probably felt that her question was too abrupt and disrespectful to him. When she spoke, her expression was apologetic and tactful. Don't think too much. It's only because your child is too beautiful that Feng Ling's expression remained unchanged and her eyes were calm. You don't have to be sorry. I'm often misunderstood in the base, probably because I'm much thinner and smaller than my peers. It's normal for me to be misunderstood in this regard. Mrs. Feng froze. So you mean, I'm a man, Feng Ling answered without hesitation. Mrs. Feng looked at her and couldn't say anything, but she felt a little unwilling, so she could only look at her. You, Mrs. Feng, just now Miss Qin said that your heart is not feeling well. As you can see in my ward, I really don't have anything to entertain you. When Miss Qin comes back, let her send you home to rest. I'm still recovering and need to rest. Feng Ling didn't intend to say too much and directly asked her to leave. Qin Qiu had lived for so long. How could she not see the indifference, alienation, and vigilance in this boy's nature, and how could she not hear the meaning of expulsion in her words? She just instinctively felt that maybe her question was too abrupt, so she could only smile at Feng Ling apologetically. Sorry. Feng Ling just looked at her indifferently, neither smiling nor annoyed. Say hello to Granny for me. The mountain is high and the road is long. We just pass by each other. I don't think we'll meet again in the future. In fact, my mother likes you very much. If you want, you can visit her often. My mother doesn't have any children at home, and you say you are an orphan. Maybe she can recognize you as, Mrs. Feng, thank you for your kindness, but I'm used to being alone. Feng Ling interrupted her again. Qin Qiu didn't know what to say, so she shut her mouth awkwardly and sat on the sofa waiting for Qin Shuk to come back. During this period, Feng Ling received a call from the base. Tam asked her if she lacked anything in the hospital. After the afternoon training, he could buy it for her and send it over. Feng Ling did not say anything and simply chatted about the base for a few days before hanging up. During this period, neither of them spoke much. When their eyes met, Mrs. Qin smiled at her lightly. Feng Ling still looked at her calmly and then retracted her gaze. She picked up the base manual that Xiao Su had given her a few days ago and sat on the bed to casually flip through it to kill time. Qin Shuk didn't know where she went to buy fruit. She went out for more than 20 minutes but still didn't come back. Qin Chiu had just taken the sedative medicine prescribed by the doctor in the consultation room. After sitting on the sofa for a while, she supported her head with one hand and closed her eyes to take a nap. Unknowingly, she leaned against the sofa and fell asleep. In her dream, the endless dark sea mercilessly swallowed the crying baby girl in the swaddling clothes. In an instant, the child disappeared from the sea, and the rolling waves roared wildly like a beast. No matter how she stood on the wet deck and cried wildly, the child still disappeared in the huge waves of the sea. Feng Ling didn't like people who made her feel strange in her place. This would make her very uncomfortable. She had been used to being alone since she was a child, so she endured it for a long time. Even though she knew that Mrs. Feng didn't mean any harm and was just waiting for Qin Shuk to come back, she still turned to look at Mrs. Qin, who was sleeping on the sofa and suddenly had a forehead full of sweat. Feng Ling didn't know if Mrs. Qin was feeling unwell or something. After reading for a while, she put down the manual in her hand, lifted the quilt on the sickbed, and got out of bed. When she walked over, she saw that Mrs. Feng had been tightly holding the old scarf on her shoulder when she fell asleep. Looking at the scarf, Feng Ling inexplicably wanted to touch it, but her reason made her restrain her hand and gently placed her hand on Mrs. Feng's forehead. "My child." Mrs. Feng suddenly opened her eyes the moment Feng Ling's hand touched her. Her eyes were so frightened that they seemed to have lost focus. However, she stared at a certain point in the room for a long time until her eyes slowly regained focus. When she saw the person standing in front of her, she looked at Feng Ling's face in a trance. "Mrs. Feng, did you have a nightmare?" Feng Ling asked indifferently and moved her hand away from her forehead. Qin Chiu looked at her for a while before she seemed to return to herself and her expression gradually calmed down. "Yes, I had a nightmare. I've had this nightmare over and over again all these years. I didn't expect that I would fall asleep sitting here. Did I forget myself just now? No." After speaking, Feng Ling glanced at the scarf on her shoulder. "Although it's a bit cold in this season, the wind hasn't picked up yet. Madame Feng has been wearing a scarf indoors. Don't you feel too hot?" What she wanted to say was that she saw Mrs. Feng wearing this scarf the last time she met her, and this time, she saw it again, and this scarf was very old, but it was really inappropriate and impolite to say this, so Feng Ling didn't say it. Qin Chiu smiled and touched the scarf on her shoulder. "This scarf was my second daughter's favorite when she was a child. The wind was very strong in the autumn when she was born. Every time I took her out, I would gently cover her face with this scarf to prevent the sand from blowing into her eyes. Later, I found that every time she cried, as long as I put this scarf on her face, she would smile, and then," Qin Chiu paused, omitted those past events, and said with a smile, "Later, I got used to keeping this scarf on me all the time. In fact, this scarf used to be red, but now after so many years, it has been washed too many times, and the color has turned yellow. Do you think this scarf is very old and ugly? No, everyone has a thing that carries a story. This scarf has been with you for so many years. It can be seen that Mrs. Feng must love your second daughter very much." After speaking, Feng Ling did not say more. After confirming that she was fine, she turned and was about to return to the bed. Feng Ling, Mrs. Feng suddenly called her. Feng Ling turned back to look at her. The moment their eyes met, Madame Feng could not help but pinch the scarf around her shoulders. She looked at her with deep emotion. It's all right. Earlier, I suddenly had something to ask you, but I suddenly forgot. Feng Ling looked at her in confusion. It was not until the door of the ward suddenly opened that she withdrew her gaze and turned to the other side. Chapter 822. When the door of the ward opened, the first person to walk in was a beautiful woman whom Feng Ling found unfamiliar. She glanced at the person who came in and then saw Qin Shuk who followed her in. "Aunt, I just met cousin Mingzhu downstairs in the hospital. She knew you were angry with her again. She was afraid that you would hurt your health, so she specially came to see you. Please don't be angry with her." Qin Shuk winked at Feng Ling and then turned her eyes to Mrs. Feng, whose face instantly darkened. So this was Mrs. Feng's daughter, Feng Mingzhu. Boss Li's fiancée. Feng Ling's gaze met Feng Mingzhu's. Feng Mingzhu only glanced at her indifferently, gave her a polite smile, and then walked past her. When she walked past, Feng Ling could clearly smell the faint, noble perfume on Feng Mingzhu's body. It smelled very good. It was a very elegant fragrance that made one feel unattainable with just a sniff. "Mom, I didn't mean to make you unhappy, but this kind of big event, since it has been decided a long time ago, it's normal for me to suddenly cancel it." Feng Mingzhu walked up to Qin Qiu and sat down next to her. She wrapped her hands around Qin Qiu's arm, put her chin on her shoulder, and said coquettishly, "Don't be angry. He is the only person I really like in my life. I really don't want to give up. I'll talk to the elders of the Li family and ask them to take back their plan to cancel the engagement, okay?" Qin Qiu didn't like to talk about family affairs in front of outsiders. She didn't want to say that the Li family broke off the engagement directly, so she just secretly glared at her daughter next to her. "You came here because of this, not because you're afraid that I'll be angry, but because you're afraid that I'll stand on the same side as your father and grandfather and really agree to cancel the engagement." Feng Mingzhu was a little helpless. "Mom, I've said it. Anyway, I won't cancel it. I'm going to marry Li Nanheng. Cousin, you should go home and say this to Aunt. My little brother Feng Ling is here. He is Mr. Li's subordinate. Aren't you afraid that these words will be spread to his ears?" Qin Shuk giggled and moved closer to Feng Ling's side. At the same time, she said, "Right, little brother Feng Ling." Feng Ling's little brother expressed, "I won't casually spread such irrelevant topics. However, it's indeed better to discuss Madame Feng's family matters at home. After all, I'm an outsider. Besides, this is a ward." "That's right. Even if cousin Mingzhu is eager to get married, don't tell everyone you meet that you have to marry into the Li family. In the future, how will our little brother Feng Ling look at his boss, Feng Ling?" She didn't know that Boss Li had such a thing to deal with. She almost couldn't look at him anymore, okay? Qin Qiu sighed. Obviously, she didn't want Feng Mingzhu to continue to be so willful. She said helplessly, "Let's not talk about this for now. Since you're in the hospital, you should stop. Usually, your family spoils and spoils you. Now your father and grandfather's decision is also for your own good." After saying this, Qin Qiu lowered her voice and said, "If you marry into the Li family and that boy Li Nanheng really has no feelings for you, will you be a widow for the rest of your life? What we want to see is that you can live a happy life, not sit in the cold palace blindly for the sake of pursuing a love, understand?" Feng Mingzhu looked very calm, but it was not difficult to see that she was a very stubborn person. She insisted, "But the Li family would rather marry my dead sister's cenotaph than marry me. Isn't this a blatant insult to me? Why should I let them insult me like this? The more they do this, the more I want to marry them. Child, why are you always so immature? Qin Qiu's face suddenly became cold. They said that they wanted to marry your sister Cenotaph just to fulfill the agreement of the marriage. On the one hand, the agreement would be fulfilled, and on the other hand, you would be able to marry a man who can really make you happy. It seems that the Li family is quite thoughtful, and they have politely asked for our opinion. Why do you have to be so extreme? I'm not extreme. I'd rather marry a dead person than marry a living one. I can't bear this insult. Feng Mingzhu was provoked by these words, and her original calm appearance faded. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. I have to let them know that I, Feng Mingzhu, am not a person who can be so perfunctory. Qin Qiu immediately glared at her fiercely. What did you say? Feng Mingzhu's expression froze. Only then did she realize that she had said something she shouldn't have said and violated her mother's taboo. She immediately withdrew her hand from Qin Qiu's arm and looked very angry, but she didn't dare to say anything else. Her sister died in the sea before she was 1 year old, but she couldn't mention the word death for so many years. At this time, Feng Ling's eyes fell on the mother and daughter who seemed to be not very happy. Although Mrs. Feng, Qin Qiu, lowered her voice, her natural acuity and her extremely sensitive hearing, which had been trained since she was a child, allowed her to hear these words clearly. Would rather marry a cenotaph. She would rather marry a dead man. Did she hear wrong, or did the eldest daughter of the Feng family say something wrong? Little brother Feng Ling, at this time, Qin Shuk leaned close to her ear and said, "Don't laugh at me. My cousin and my aunt usually talk like this. My aunt is relatively strict with my cousin's education. My cousin grew up under the pressure of the family and has a rebellious temperament, so as long as they talk about something, they will act like this. They don't seem happy, but my aunt only has one precious daughter, my cousin, and in fact, she loves her very much." Feng Ling paused. Although she knew that it had nothing to do with her and she shouldn't ask, there was still an inexplicable question in her heart. She turned to look at Qin Shuk who had been pestering her and asked in a low voice, "Is she the only daughter? But why did I just hear Mrs. Feng mention your second daughter?" Qin Shuk simply leaned close to Feng Ling's ear and whispered a few words. When Feng Ling's eyes gradually became clear, she retreated and then said with a smile, "Little brother Feng Ling, what brand of shower gel do you usually use? Why do I feel that you smell better than me?" Chapter 823. Although she knew that Qin Shuk was just doing this out of kindness, Feng Ling was still not used to being approached like this. Qin Shuk didn't continue to pester her and only said, "Are you going to stay in the hospital for a few more days? Then I have nothing to do these days. I'll come to the hospital often to accompany you, okay?" As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something. She turned around and brought in 2 big bags of fruits that were placed on the bench outside the ward. "These are the fruits I bought just now. I almost forgot when I was talking with cousin Mingzhu outside the ward. I don't know what you like to eat, so I bought a lot of them. You can choose whatever you like." "Really, no need." Before Feng Ling finished speaking, Qin Shuk enthusiastically put the fruits on the square table by the bed and took out the fruit knife and disposable fruit plate she bought together and began to cut the fruits. Feng Mingzhu and Mrs. Feng didn't have a pleasant conversation. After sitting on the sofa for a while, Mrs. Feng got up and said that she was leaving. Feng Mingzhu didn't look very good, but she still got up obediently. "Little brother, we're leaving. I just wanted to see you, but I didn't expect that my daughter's problem hasn't been solved yet. Sorry to disturb you." After speaking, Mrs. Feng didn't wait for Feng Ling to speak and turned to leave. It could be seen that she was really in a bad mood. Just now, Feng Ling only noticed Qin Shuk who had been cutting the fruits and didn't pay much attention to what the 2 mothers were talking about. She didn't know why she was unhappy, so she could only nod as a farewell. However, after they went out, Qin Shuk gently put the cut fruits on the fruit plate, took Feng Ling's hand, and told her to do the aerosol treatment on time, to listen to the doctor's words, and to rest more. She nagged a lot, and in the end, Feng Ling had to personally send them into the elevator, and then because Qin Shuk was unwilling to let go of her hand, she sent them to the main entrance hall on the first floor of the hospital. It was raining outside. The rain was not heavy, and they could walk a few steps to get into the car. No one took an umbrella. Seeing that it was raining outside, Qin Shuk didn't continue to pull Feng Ling out. She turned back and reluctantly said goodbye to Feng Ling. Although the rain was not heavy, some light rain still drifted in and landed on Feng Ling's head. In just 2 or 3 minutes, her clean and soft short hair was slightly wet on her forehead, but it made her calm and fair face look even more handsome and exquisite. And the loose light blue hospital gown on Feng Ling's body, coupled with Feng Ling's slightly gentler expression, really made Qin Shuk's heart pound wildly. Feng Ling. Qin Shuk was about to get into the car. After thinking for a while, she turned and ran back to Feng Ling. She didn't know if it was because she ran too fast or because she was simply blushing, but she panted and said, "Can I come to the hospital to see you tomorrow?" Feng Ling looked at the mischievous little girl in front of her. For the first time in so many years, she was a little upset about her gender. It seemed like she was about to hurt a girl's heart. However, there shouldn't be too many opportunities to meet in the future. If it was just a simple love, it would be much better than finding out the truth. I'm not sure if the doctor allows me to see people often, and the base also has some rules. If it's not necessary, Miss Qin, you'd better not come, Feng Ling said euphemistically. The taste of being rejected was always not good. Although she knew that Feng Ling would definitely not agree, hearing such a straightforward answer, Qin Shuk was still a little disappointed. She lowered her head, raised her hand, and tugged at Feng Ling's cuff weakly. Then I can't see you again in the future. Feng Ling looked at the little girl's white and delicate fingertips and was about to push her hand away when Qin Shuk suddenly clenched her cuff. How about this? I won't disturb you these days, but on the day you leave the hospital, I'll come to see you, okay? Miss Qin, it's still raining outside. Let's talk about it later. If you keep standing like this, you will catch a cold. Feng Ling didn't answer but calmly reminded her. Qin Shuk's eyes lit up at this moment. She wanted to say that if she caught a cold, she could take this opportunity to get an injection or be hospitalized in the hospital, so that she could get close to him. But when the words came to her mouth, she saw that Feng Ling didn't seem to be interested in her at all, so she had to shut her mouth and reluctantly let go of Feng Ling's sleeve. Then I'll go back with my aunt and cousin first. If we have a chance to meet again in the future, I'll ask for your phone number. Can you give it to me? Next time. There shouldn't be a next time, right? Feng Ling just smiled lightly. Then let's talk about it next time. As if hearing a glimmer of hope from such hopeless words, Qin Shuk immediately grinned, turned, and ran back to the car quickly. She then turned back to wave at Feng Ling and entered the car. The tall black Hummer galloped in the rain and stopped in front of the hospital. When Li Nanheng rolled down the window, he saw such a scene. The girl stood in the rain and reluctantly tugged at the sleeves of the boy, and then the boy seemed to promise her something. The girl blushed and happily turned to run to the car not far away. On the passenger seat of the Hummer, there was a tablet that had not been turned off. On it was a video conference of the base that had just ended. The screen was dark, and the conference had just ended a minute ago. Li Nanheng, who had opened the window to light a cigarette, played with the silver lighter in his left hand, glanced indifferently at the boy standing in front of the hospital, and his dark eyes darkened, and even a lot of coldness entered his eyes. The phone rang at this time. It was Xiao Su. Li Nanheng took a look at it and picked it up. Speak. Boss, I don't think I can come back tonight. I don't think Feng Ling has a big problem in the hospital. If you are worried, ask Kay and the others to come to accompany him, Xiao Su said apologetically. Xiao Su said apologetically, but Feng Ling doesn't like staying in the hospital. He pays attention to the matters in the base. If there's a mission, he'll definitely rush back to the base even if the treatment period hasn't ended. It's good to send someone to watch over him, in case he always thinks of himself as an invincible soldier. The treatment hasn't ended yet, but he can't wait to go back to train and take on missions. Well, I'm near the hospital. I'll be here tonight. Li Nanheng's tone was cold. Chapter 824. Seeing that the car Qin Shuk took had driven away, Nanheng pressed the lighter with a pa sound, pushed open the door, got out of the car, threw the lighter in his hand back into the car, and walked straight to the boy in front of the hospital. Summer was almost over, and the autumn rain in Los Angeles was a little cold, so today, Li Nanheng was dressed differently from before. He wore a black double-breasted trench coat over a well-ironed suit. His whole body exuded coolness and arrogance, and his cold and flawless face, like that of an ancient Roman royal family, attracted countless gazes outside the hospital in just a few seconds. But before the group of people outside the hospital came back to their senses, the handsome man had already walked up the marble stairs in front of the hospital, dragged the collar of the boy in a light blue hospital gown over, and said coldly and indifferently, "Have you forgotten what I said to you? Members of the base are forbidden to fall in love. Do you want to be driven out of the base, or do you have a brain that only knows how to talk about love at such a young age?" Feng Ling's collar was almost pressed against her head by the man's sudden tug. The moment she turned back, she saw Li Nanheng's unhappy expression and couldn't help but explain, "Mrs. Feng came to the hospital for a checkup. Miss Qin accompanied her here and met her in the hospital." What a coincidence. Nanheng snorted and continued to drag her in. Being dragged by the collar, Feng Ling's footsteps were not very steady, and she said helplessly, "It's true. What's more coincidental is that I also saw your fiancé today, boss." Nanheng didn't stop at all. He dragged her into the elevator, pressed the button to close the door of the elevator in the floor where Feng Ling's ward was, and glanced at her coldly. "What fiancé?" Feng Ling hurriedly raised her hand to adjust her collar that had been slightly loosened. As she did so, she said, "It's Mrs. Feng's daughter. I think her name is Feng Mingzhu. They said she's Boss Li's fiancé, isn't she?" Li Nanheng didn't take Feng Mingzhu's matter to heart at all, but when the word fiancé suddenly came out of Feng Ling's mouth, he felt a little uncomfortable. He glanced at the boy who was a head shorter than him. "So what if I am? So what if I'm not?" "Nothing much. I just said that their whole family came to the hospital today, and I coincidentally met them." "It's not what you think, boss." Feng Ling's tone was as usual. Li Nanheng glanced at her indifferently. "If I really marry Feng Mingzhu in 2 years, what do you think?" Feng Ling was silent for a moment before answering calmly, "What do I think? Of course, it's to wish you and the future Mrs. Li a happy marriage and a son soon." Feng Ling happened to raise her head as she spoke, her eyes bright and beautiful. "But boss, do you like Miss Feng or that Miss Qin? Since we're really going to get married, I think it's better to be faithful. I see that you seem to mind Miss Qin very much. Then Miss Feng." The two of them were on completely different channels. The veins on Li Nanheng's forehead throbbed. "When did I say that I minded that Qin Shuk? Boss, don't you dislike her being too close to me? If I'm not interested in her, could it be that I'm not allowed to fall in love?" Li Nanheng was so angry that he laughed. Then he glanced at Feng Ling with a sneer and strode out when the elevator stopped on the floor where the ward was. Feng Ling looked at his back with a confused expression and followed him out. When they were about to return to the ward, Li Nanheng turned back to look at her. Seeing that she was walking slowly, he reached out to grab her wrist and dragged her into the ward. The moment the door was slammed shut with a pang sound, before Feng Ling could react, she was abruptly pressed against the door. The man's hand was firmly pressed against her shoulder and could not be moved. Feng Ling looked at the man standing close to her in a daze. She wanted to struggle but couldn't. "Boss?" The man looked down at the fair-skinned boy, glanced at the boy's short hair that was slightly wet because of the rain, and said with a deep gaze, "In the future, don't listen to rumors. I don't have a fiancé. Don't put such unnecessary labels on me, understand?" Feng Ling. "I didn't label you, boss. I just heard it. As long as you don't hear it from my own mouth, everything you hear is nonsense. My own life and my own marriage won't follow the bullshit arrangements of my family. Feng Mingzhu, that kind of rich young lady, isn't my cup of tea. Just looking at her makes me lose my appetite. In the future, don't mention this name in front of me. Okay. Remember what I said." "Ah. What?" "No matter now or many years later, no matter in the base or anywhere else, as long as you don't hear it from me, don't take it seriously. This is the same for everyone. Don't listen to anyone's hearsay." Feng Ling looked at the warning and seriousness in Li Nanheng's eyes and nodded sincerely. "I see." Seeing that Feng Ling really remembered it, Nanheng turned on the light switch on the wall by the door, and the lights in the room instantly turned on. Feng Ling was not used to the sudden light. She narrowed her eyes slightly and moved her head aside. The man lowered his eyes and saw the fluffy hair by the boy's ear, which made his heart itch. He was really a guy who could always make people's hearts itch. Nanheng pulled his hand away from the door behind her with a cold face, ignored the boy's blank and innocent expression, and said lightly, "Xiao Su won't go back to the hospital today. I just went to the Li Corporation to attend a meeting this morning and passed by the hospital. I'll stay with you tonight." No wonder boss was dressed so formally today. He didn't look like he just came from the base. It turned out that he went to the Li Corporation. She had never seen boss in a suit like this. Many years ago in the orphanage, she just caught a glimpse of him. However, when Li Nanheng wore a suit, he looked different from other elite men. Although he was dressed in a suit, he still looked tough and ruffian, which was a different kind of handsomeness. When they got out of the elevator, Feng Ling noticed that when several nurses passed by looked in Li Nanheng's direction, their faces were all red with shyness and infatuation. But at that time, it was Nanheng who suddenly carried her back to the ward that ruined this handsome feeling. It was still so rough that she had nothing to say. Dash. Chapter 825. Li Nanheng looked back and was about to speak when he suddenly saw that Feng Ling seemed to be looking at his clothes. He expressionlessly took off his trench coat, threw it on the sofa, and casually pulled open the collar of his shirt. It was just a simple and casual action of quickly taking off his clothes, but there was an inexplicable hint of wildness in his manliness, causing Feng Ling's gaze to stiffen. "What are you looking at?" Nanheng glanced at her coldly again. Feng Ling quickly looked away and walked away from the door quickly. When she was about to return to the bed, she suddenly heard the man say, "What? Look at your attitude. Are you not convinced?" "No." Feng Ling tidied up her slightly messy collar and said, "But boss, you really don't have to be unhappy because of the matter between me and Miss Qin. I don't have any feelings for an innocent little girl like Miss Qin, but she doesn't have any bad intentions, so I can't hurt her heart too much." "Hurt a little girl's heart?" Nanheng raised his eyebrows and looked at the young man who had already tidied up his hospital gown. The young man's face was clearly very likable, but he was usually too cold and heartless, but he showed a little rare patience to a little girl. He sneered coldly and casually unbuttoned the exquisite and expensive cuffs of his shirt. In the end, opposites attract each other. It's rare for you to be soft-hearted. Feng Ling just smiled, and her short black hair, which had just been wet by the raindrops, fell on her forehead. Boss, if you have to think so crooked, then I can't help it. I always remember the rules and regulations of the base and will not violate the rules. Okay, remember what you said. Nanhing didn't continue to harp on this matter. After glancing at Feng Ling, he unbuttoned his shirt, took it off, and went into the bathroom bare-chested. Since the last time she saw Boss Li directly take off his clothes here, Feng Ling had been used to it, but she still looked away. Not long after, Li Nanhing changed his clothes and came out. When she turned back, she noticed that he had only changed his suit and shirt. In the bathroom of her ward, there was the suit he changed out of last time. After washing it, he sent it back here. Feng Ling didn't know where to put it, so she simply threw it in the closet in the bathroom. It was just a set of clothes, and he actually remembered that it was here. Should he say that Boss's memory was too good, or that he didn't take it away because he had other intentions? However, even if he had other intentions, what else could he be after? Feng Ling didn't understand why this thought popped up in her mind. Li Nanhing came out and approached her. Ignoring the strange emotion that flashed across Feng Ling's eyes, he asked mildly, "Have you done the atomization today?" Feng Ling knew that he was no longer angry, so she didn't continue to argue about Qin Shuk. She glanced sideways at the rain outside the window, took a small step to the side, and instinctively kept a relatively safe distance from him. She answered, "Yes, I've done it. From this morning to just now, I've done it twice. The doctor said I'm recovering well." Just as Nanhing was about to say something, the door of the ward was suddenly knocked, and then a young nurse came in. When the nurse saw two good-looking men standing inside, one tall and one thin, although it was not the first time she had seen them, she still couldn't help blushing. After all, she had come in with the chief doctor several times before, but today she came in alone. "That. Mr. Feng, the doctor asked you to go to his consultation room. He wants to check your lungs and wounds again." The nurse stuttered while glancing at them from time to time. They were obviously two extremely rare men, but even though their auras were completely different, there seemed to be something even colder than indifference in their bones. Furthermore, although that tall man's gaze towards her wasn't impolite, that icy rain-like coldness really made her shiver. It was so cold that she didn't even dare to say what she wanted to say next. She hurriedly shut her mouth, turned around, and quickly walked out, not daring to look back. "Are you hostile to all the girls in the world?" Feng Ling couldn't help asking. "The nurse came to inform me to go to the consultation room." "How did she offend you? Why did you glare at her like that?" Li Nanhing withdrew his cold gaze toward the door and said indifferently, "Did I glare at her? If you didn't, would the nurse be so scared that she ran away with her tail between her legs? Then she must have seen wrongly." The man's expression didn't change. Feng Ling, she couldn't stand this man in front of her, so she turned around and was about to go out. As soon as she turned around and took 2 steps, the back of her collar was grabbed again. Li Nanhing put one hand in his black trouser pocket and grabbed her collar with the other, like a devil who could stretch out its claws at any time. As long as he was unhappy, he would never let go of the puppet in his hand easily. The man's expression was cold and arrogant. "I'll accompany you to the consultation room. It's very cold in the corridor. Put on a coat and then go." Feng Ling thought that even if he wanted to accompany her to the consultation room, he didn't have to grab her collar again and again, right? Fortunately, she still had a loose vest inside. Otherwise, if she was pulled like this, sooner or later, he would find the breast wrap inside. She twitched the corner of her mouth and calmly turned to pick up the new coat that Xiao Su had bought for her. When she put it on, she saw that Li Nanhing seemed to be satisfied with her eyes, so she finally went out. When she went out in the corridor, she was inevitably baptized by the gazes of a group of nurses. Feng Ling walked forward expressionlessly, and Li Nanheng walked past her without shifting his gaze an inch. Although the two men were walking together, for some reason, the group of nurses blushed and their hearts beat so fast that they felt that they were very compatible. Was it because of their height and figure? That's not right. Usually, the cutest height difference in everyone's eyes should be tall and big, while the girl is petite and exquisite. However, this slightly shorter and thinner little fresh meat next to him definitely looked more than 165 centimeters tall. He definitely wasn't the cute type. But they really matched each other inexplicably. Boss, when you walk with me in the future, can you keep a little distance? When they were about to walk to the consultation room, Feng Ling suddenly said in a low voice. Li Nanheng lowered his eyes and glanced at her. What distance? Chapter 8:26. What's wrong with that? Stop talking nonsense. The man put his arm around her shoulder coldly. At the moment when Feng Ling paused, he pushed her into the door of the consulting room. Go in and have a check. Don't talk nonsense. Feng Ling stayed in the consultation room for a full 40 minutes before coming out. Li Nanheng first smoked 2 cigarettes in the only smoking room in the corridor of the hospital. Feeling that it was almost time, he threw the cigarette butts into the fireproof trash can and strode out. As soon as he walked near the consulting room, he saw the door open and Feng Ling came out. She seemed to be in good condition. What did the doctor say? He just said that I'm recovering well. Feng Ling raised her eyes. Boss, the doctor has said more than once that I'm fine. I applied to you last time to be discharged from the hospital and go back to the base. Let's talk about it later. The man looked away expressionlessly, turned around, and walked toward the ward. Feng Ling followed him quickly, saying, but it's not necessary to stay in the hospital for 3 more days. The base also has certain standards for the wounded. You've just recovered, and you have to face high-intensity training every day as soon as you go back. If you cough or feel any discomfort because of the intensity of training, the members will think that 11 Base lacks humane care for the wounded. It's useless for you to say that you're almost recovered. Listen to the doctor's arrangement and stay for a week. As he spoke, he had walked back to the ward. It was still raining outside. Li Nanheng glanced out and saw that Feng Ling was still thin, although she had nothing to do in the hospital these days. He said lightly, Xiao Su has prepared 3 meals for you these days. Now Xiao Su is not here. What do you want to eat? I'll buy it. No, boss, I'll just eat the simple meals in the hospital. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows. You want to eat the simple meals in the hospital, but it doesn't mean I want to eat them too. I'll go out and buy them. Why bother to come here twice? Tell me, what do you want to eat? Then anything is fine. Boss, as long as you like it. Feng Ling expressed that she had almost lost all her desires under the oppression of the boss. Okay, wait for me. With that, Li Nanheng turned and walked out. At this time, Feng Ling also glanced at the rain outside the window. She was about to chase out and ask him how to get out. After all, it was raining heavily. However, she had just taken a step when she suddenly paused. Why did she care so much? Was there a need for her to worry about a grown man? An hour later. Feng Ling was originally sitting on the bed waiting for her dinner, but as she waited, she almost fell asleep. Suddenly, she vaguely smelled the fragrance of roasted meat. She opened her eyes abruptly and subconsciously turned to look at the door. Sure enough, the door of the ward opened at this moment, and the tall man returned with 2 warm takeout boxes in his hands. When Li Nanheng placed the takeout on the table by her bedside, she opened the box and looked at the kebabs inside. The meat on the kebabs clearly smelled burnt and smelled especially fragrant. She clearly remembered that the food street she went to with Boss last time was very far away. Did Boss drive directly to the food street? Wasn't he afraid that he couldn't get out of the traffic jam? However, it wasn't hard to tell that Boss used a very fast speed to bring the skewers back after he finished roasting them. The taste didn't change at all. What are you waiting for? Didn't you say you wanted to eat it last time? Li Nanheng casually took out 2 of the best roasted skewers and put them in her hands. He used one hand to pick up the cigarette box that he threw on the table before leaving, threw it on the sofa far away, and then sat down at the table. As if afraid that Feng Ling would be pricked, he quickly took the meat off the skewers, put them all into the clean lunch box in front of her, and handed her a pair of chopsticks. Eat quickly. Anything that is roasted must be eaten while it's hot. It won't taste good when it's cold. Xiao Su originally had something to do and couldn't come back today, but because of the sudden heavy rain, the matter was temporarily put on hold, so he simply rushed back to the hospital. Just now, he happened to meet Boss Li outside. Now that he was outside the ward and saw this scene through the glass door, his mood instantly became extremely complicated. After all, this was the first time he saw Boss Li deliberately drive to the food street in the troublesome area where traffic was easy to jam. He even carefully asked the boss for an insulated lunchbox and held it all the way back to the car, not caring that it was hot. At that time, he didn't even lock the door, and when he came back, he had been covering it with his coat as if afraid of being wet by the rain. He sent it back to the ward and then helped Feng Ling take off all the meat on the skewers. Not only did he take it off, but Boss seemed to want to feed it directly into Feng Ling's mouth. As someone who saw Boss driving out when he just came back, Xiao Su, who came back to see this scene, felt this was really not in line with Boss Li's usual cold and aloof style. No. Didn't Boss usually hate sickly and delicate beauties the most? Usually, whenever a member of the base asked for leave because he was sick or claimed to be unwell, Boss would roll his eyes impatiently. He really disliked those members who often felt unwell, but right now, Feng Ling was clearly in the hospital and couldn't move her hands or shoulders, but Boss took care of her in every way. Feng Ling, as usual, was no different from usual. She didn't notice Xiao Su's figure flashing by outside and Xiao Su's expression as if his jaw was about to drop off. Because Boss had helped her take off a lot of meat, she was afraid that it would really be cold, so she picked up the chopsticks and began to eat, with a smile on her lips. "Boss, aren't you going to eat?" Hearing this, Li Nanheng turned his head to glance at her. Because he saw that the corner of the boy's mouth was accidentally stained with cumin, he bent down to wipe it for her. However, when his hand was about to touch her, Feng Ling instinctively dodged slightly. Li Nanheng's brows moved, and he reached out to wipe it again. The man's fingertips instantly swept across the boy's lips. Feng Ling raised her eyes to look at him, and Li Nanheng's fingers also stiffened in an instant. It was clearly an incredibly warm and soft touch, but it made him itch from his fingertips to his heart. In an instant, the man's voice also turned cold. He withdrew his hand, took out a tissue, and threw it in front of her. "Wipe it yourself." Chapter 827. Feng Ling wiped her mouth with a tissue and glanced at him. She didn't understand what was wrong with Boss Li. Why did this man seem to be in a bad mood? It was strange. In just a few minutes, Feng Ling was attracted by the pile of meat in front of her. She ate one bite after another happily. It seemed that this was the most delicious food she had eaten since she was a child, except for the food in the base cafeteria. Feng Ling didn't expect her appetite to be so good. After eating more than half of the food he bought, the man suddenly moved the lunchbox in front of her away. The chopsticks in Feng Ling's hand froze in the air and she looked at him in confusion. "Boss? You eat so much at one time. Aren't you afraid of indigestion? Boss, you bought so much food. Should I eat it all up? There's no need for that. I bought so many so that you can eat more, not so that you can eat all of them. If a vegetarian suddenly eats so much meat in one meal, you might get indigestion and hurt your stomach. What if you blame me for that? The man threw the lunchbox aside with one hand and lifted his eyelids indifferently. At least you can return to the base in 3 days and resume training immediately. Otherwise, you'll have to take a few more days off because of your stomach discomfort. Feng Ling, however, when he mentioned returning to the base for training, Feng Ling felt at ease. It seemed that boss didn't blame her for her mistake, nor did he intend to stop her from returning to the base. Feng Ling obediently gave up the plan to eat so much meat and got up to drink water. Seeing her so obedient, Li Nanheng was very satisfied. After all, she was a member of his team. It was better to be obedient than to make trouble everywhere and be unruly. This was the most intuitive thought in Li Nanheng's heart. After all, the skewers were more or less salty. A glass of water was not enough, so Feng Ling took her own cup and turned to the water dispenser to pour a glass of warm water and drink a few mouthfuls. When she was about to put down the cup, she suddenly heard Li Nanheng's voice. How is the water temperature? Feng Ling subconsciously held the cup and glanced at him. It's not bad. It's not hot or cold. It's just right. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows and curled his lips slightly. He said nonchalantly, I happen to be thirsty. Bring it over and let me have a few mouthfuls. Hearing his words, Feng Ling fell silent for a moment. She clearly felt that this was wrong, but since they were both men, and boss didn't have a fixed cup here, he already said that he wanted to use her cup. He had no intention of treating her as an outsider. If she insisted on taking a disposable paper cup, boss might lecture her again. Feng Ling was conflicted for a moment. She felt that she had stayed in the hospital for too long and was too free. She was actually conflicted. She walked over and was about to hand him the glass. Li Nanheng pressed her hand, lowered his head, and took a sip of water from the place where she had just touched. The man's cold and indescribably charming face made Feng Ling feel uncomfortable. She felt as though her hair was about to stand up, and her ears were filled with the man's words. Feng Mingzhu was not his fiancée. He had no fiancée. He wouldn't listen to his family's arrangements and marry a random woman. Why did she suddenly think of these words? Feng Ling was about to pull her hand back, but the man clearly hadn't drunk enough. He pressed her hand and continued to press his lips against the edge of the cup she had just drunk. After drinking all the remaining water in the cup, he let go of her hand. The water temperature is not bad. When the man let go of her hand, he indifferently glanced at the water dispenser not far away. What's in the water dispenser in the hospital? What's in it? Feng Ling hadn't returned to her senses and asked blankly. The man glanced at her meaningfully. I'm not sure, but this water is a little sweet. Is it sweet? Feng Ling smacked her lips suspiciously. After a while, she said, no, it just tastes like normal water. Seeing that Li Nanheng didn't speak, Feng Ling's heart inexplicably trembled. She couldn't tell what she felt, but she instinctively avoided his gaze, turned to the water dispenser, and took half a glass of water. She took another sip, then put down the cup, turned around, and licked the water droplets that fell from her lips, saying, it still tastes very normal. Boss was probably implying that the water was spiked with some kind of medicine. Every member of the base should be vigilant. If someone had drugged the water dispenser in her ward, it seemed that she would have to investigate the doctors and nurses who often came and went here. But there was no problem with the taste, and looking at Boss Li's expression, it didn't seem to mean what she thought. Feng Ling couldn't help licking her lips again. Boss? Li Nanheng looked at the boy's rare confused expression and plain face, and the way she licked her lips from time to time, which was particularly seductive. He actually had an impulse to go over and kiss her. Li Nanheng instantly withdrew his gaze, turned his head to the window, looked at the rain outside with his deep eyes, and then looked at the time, saying, Xiao Su just came back. I met him outside. He is still staying in the lounge tonight. I'm in the ward. When Feng Ling heard that Boss was going to stay in her ward again, she couldn't help glancing in the direction of the bathroom. However, when Li Nanheng turned back and saw her expression, he immediately said coldly, Do you think I will still take a shower in your bathroom? Do you think I really like to be seen by others? Don't even think about it. Feng Ling cursed in her heart, Boss, I don't mean that. I took a shower before coming back and just changed my clothes. That's all for tonight. The man's voice was indifferent and cold. But it was really not comfortable to sleep on this sofa last time, so I was called over by Xiao Su. Now that Xiao Su is back, I don't even have a normal place to rest. Feng Ling subconsciously pointed to her hospital bed, but when she remembered that Boss said she was cursing him to sleep in the hospital bed last time, she just pointed with her finger and didn't speak. Li Nanheng sharply glanced in the direction of her finger. You want me to sleep in your bed? Feng Ling smiled. If Boss doesn't mind, this is a hospital bed, of course. Li Nanheng turned to look at her hospital bed thoughtfully, got up, and suddenly walked over. After circling around the bed, he looked at the size of the bed seriously and said indifferently, It's just sleeping. I don't mind, but isn't it too crowded for the two of us to sleep in this bed? Sleep with the two of them? Did he mean that he wanted to sleep with her? Chapter 828. Boss, this bed is indeed too crowded for two people. I can sleep on the sofa. He really wanted to repeat the same old trick, but it seemed like this sentence had never had any effect in the past. Before Feng Ling could say the words on the tip of her tongue, Li Nanheng had already laid down, patted the empty space on the other side of the bed twice, and turned his head to look at her. Come here, lie down and have a try. Feng Ling didn't move. Why are you standing there? Lie down and see if it's too crowded. If it's too crowded, I'll continue to sleep on the sofa. The man's voice was flat but firm. Since he had said so, Feng Ling glanced at the empty space next to him and sat on the edge of the bed. However, as soon as she sat down, before she had time to decide whether to lie flat or on her side, her arm was suddenly pulled hard from behind, and she suddenly fell back unprepared. The moment she fell into the man's arms, Feng Ling rushed to get up, but the man steadied her body and pressed her to the empty space on the edge of the bed without saying anything. Feng Ling immediately lay motionless on the bed as if petrified. The man beside her stretched out his arms to test the distance. At the same time, he reached over her body and touched the side of her bed. Finally, he commented, Not bad. It's not too crowded to sleep two people. Feng Ling felt that she might have been a little too cautious in recent days, so she could only remain silent and did not say much. When Li Nanheng sat up, she still lay in the same position and looked sideways at the man next to her. All right, let's sleep like this tonight. When Nanheng got up, he pressed the bed under him. The softness of this bed is not bad. Last time I slept on the sofa for a whole night, and my back hurt for 2 days. With that, he got up to get a pack of cigarettes and a lighter, and said, If you're tired, go to sleep first. I'll go out for a smoke and come back. Feng Ling looked out of the window, the rain had stopped, and replied, Okay. The boy's voice was particularly soft. Li Nanheng, who was about to go out, suddenly paused, looked back at her, turned the silver lighter in his hand, and then turned to walk out. While Boss Li went out to smoke, Feng Ling hurriedly got up, locked the door from the inside, and rushed into the bathroom to take a shower. She had wrapped the chest cloth around her body for a day, and just now she vaguely felt a little sweaty. If she didn't take a shower now, she would probably be unable to fall asleep because of the sticky feeling on her body. Based on her understanding of Boss Lee, she knew that he wouldn't smoke for too long or too short, and Xiao Su also returned to the hospital today. They would probably meet outside. The two men would go out to smoke and chat for at least 10 minutes. She would take a quick shower in these 10 minutes. 5 minutes to take a shower, 3 minutes to wrap the chest cloth, and 1 minute to put on clothes. Sure enough, in less than 10 minutes, when Feng Ling opened the bathroom door, she heard the familiar footsteps of a man approaching. In case Boss found out that she had locked the door, she quickly rushed over to open the lock inside, and then turned back to the bathroom to put the chest cloth and clothes she had just changed into the bottom of the laundry bag. When she was sure that she would not be found out, the door had already been opened. Li Nanheng bought a glass bottle of hot milk in the supermarket downstairs of the hospital. As soon as he entered the door, he heard the sound in the bathroom. Feng Ling seemed to have just taken a shower, and he could smell the shower gel wafting out of the bathroom. The man glanced at Feng Ling's wet hair hanging on her forehead and then glanced at the boy's cheeks, which were much more tender than usual after taking a shower. He wanted to restrain himself, but he couldn't help looking down. He glanced at the collar of the hospital gown that the boy had buttoned up to the top and didn't see anything he wanted to see, so he withdrew his gaze expressionlessly, walked to the bed, and put down the bottle of hot milk in his hand. "I bought it on the way back. Drink some before going to bed. It can help you sleep." Feng Ling picked up a dry towel to dry her hair and poked her head out of the bathroom door to say, "Boss, I sleep very well. Drink it yourself." "Really?" Li Nanheng looked back at her and sneered. "Last time I stayed here for a night, I heard you turning over at night. Are you sure you sleep well?" "Feng Ling, isn't that because you, the great Buddha, came to my ward to sleep?" Feng Ling put down the towel, feeling that if she really slept in the same bed with Boss Lee tonight, she probably wouldn't be able to sleep. "Okay, I'll drink it right away." After speaking, she continued to dry her hair. When her hair was half dry and only a little wet, she casually shook her hair and walked out. When she picked up the bottle of milk, she found that it was still hot and immediately looked up at Li Nanheng. "By the way, I asked someone in the supermarket to heat it up. The temperature is just right. Drink it." The man unbuttoned his coat, and after speaking, he swaggered to the bed, reluctantly leaving half of the space for her to go to bed. Feng Ling opened the lid, took a sip, and then smacked her lips. Li Nanheng had closed his eyes. There were a lot of things waiting for him to deal with when he returned to the Li Corporation during the day. He was exhausted and just wanted to sleep now. Hearing this guy smacking his lips, he closed his eyes and asked, "Is it good?" "Not bad. Boss, you bought sweet milk. It's very delicious." "Okay." The man seemed to be very satisfied, but he was also very tired. He closed his eyes and responded lightly, turned over, and fell asleep. Seeing that the man fell asleep in her bed in less than 10 seconds, Feng Ling sat by the side and drank milk, wondering whether she should go up to sleep or not. At the same time, she lowered her head to check her clothes and chest wrapping cloth. After drinking the milk, Feng Ling gently put down the bottle, turned around, and was about to return to the sofa when the man on the bed suddenly turned over at this moment. The man closed his eyes and said hoarsely, "Come to sleep." Feng Ling was silent. He woke up. She looked back at the man on the bed. "Boss, I'm not good at sleeping. I'm afraid it will affect the quality of your sleep." The man didn't speak anymore, but turned sideways, leaving more space on the bed. He didn't talk nonsense with her, but obviously asked her to go up to sleep. Feng Ling walked back, and when lying down, she raised her hand and touched her chest casually. After making sure that she wouldn't be discovered if she didn't touch it carefully, she lay stiffly beside him. Chapter 829. No matter how accustomed Feng Ling was to being with a group of men, she was really not used to it right now. Li Nanheng was really tired and soon fell asleep again. The man's steady breathing was by her ear. She put one hand on herself and the other hand clenched the bed sheet under her. She stared at the ceiling of the ward under the dim night light and glanced sideways at the man who was sleeping soundly. It wasn't that she hadn't had close contact with him before. At least a few years ago, when Li Nanheng tested her personally, the two of them had restrained each other for a while because of close combat. At that time, the distance between them was very close, but the atmosphere at that time was different from now. At that time, it was the sweat and fighting on the training ground and her pride. But now, in such a quiet space, she felt a man lying next to her without any distracting thoughts. His breath was less than 10 centimeters away from her ears, and she could even feel the obvious gap between the man and the man she was pretending to be. Li Nanheng's masculine scent was vividly displayed. There was the smell of laundry detergent on clean clothes and a very faint and somewhat intoxicating scent of tobacco. Feng Ling didn't know if the man's breathing when he was sleeping made her feel at ease, but she gradually closed her eyes. She didn't know how long she had slept. In her dream, Feng Ling felt that she seemed to be imprisoned somewhere and couldn't move her hands and feet. She suddenly woke up and almost bumped into the man's face when she turned her eyes. At first glance, she saw that it was Boss Li who was still sleeping. Her heart beat even faster from the shock. She looked at the man's handsome face that was close to her and then lowered her head to see that her calf was directly pressed by his long leg and her two arms were held by him. She was completely held in the man's arms. Feng Ling quietly and gently pushed his hand away. When she got up to move his legs away, the man's brows suddenly furrowed. He abruptly opened his eyes in the darkness and looked at her with his sleepy and dark eyes. "What are you doing?" She wasn't sure if he knew the position he was in when he was sleeping, so she kicked his leg away and stood up. "I'm going to the bathroom." When Li Nanheng was asleep, he was like a sleeping lion. At this moment, he was like a lion that was suddenly awakened. His eyes were dark and dangerous. Perhaps it was his natural sensitivity, but after glancing at her again, he glanced at the bed under the two of them and found that he had unintentionally moved closer to her side when he was asleep. He alone occupied almost 2/3 of the space. Without speaking again, he turned over and continued to sleep with his back to her. Feng Ling didn't know whether Boss Li was unhappy because she woke him up or because of something else, but in this case, the more she said, the more suspicious she would be, so she simply continued to remain silent. She went to the bathroom and stayed for a while. After going to the toilet, she slowly returned to the bed. However, as soon as she climbed into bed, Li Nanheng suddenly stood up. She couldn't help looking up at the man who suddenly stood up. Seeing that Li Nanheng also turned to go to the toilet, she lay down again. However, after the man came back from the toilet, he felt that the ward was a little stuffy, especially when the two of them slept on the bed together. He was about to open the window when he saw that it was raining intermittently outside. It was not suitable to open the window in the autumn rain season. It was easy to catch a cold, not to mention this was a ward, and there was a patient living in it. He glanced out of the window into the dark night, took off his shirt, and walked back. Still not sleeping. After taking off his clothes, Li Nanheng casually threw the jacket and black t-shirt aside, and then untied his belt. Under Feng Ling's stunned expression, he seemed to hesitate for a moment, and finally fastened the belt again, and walked to the bed. In the 30 seconds when the man untied and fastened his belt, Feng Ling could only see his perfect upper body with the dim night light in the ward. Every inch of his abdominal muscles was extremely sexy, and he only wore this pair of black trousers. The simple trousers that matched the combat uniform wrapped around his two straight, slender, and powerful legs. As the silver buckle in front of the belt was buckled again, it was even more sexy, as if he was tempting her to commit a crime. He sat back on the bed and saw that Feng Ling's eyes were open a moment ago, but now they were closed. Are you a corpse? Feng Ling. Boss, go to sleep. The man snorted. How can I sleep like this? Look at your expression. If I don't know, I might think I'm going to rape your corpse. Feng Ling, he lay down with his upper body bare, turned over, and looked at Feng Ling. He moved his fingers and directly pulled the boy's ear, but his eyes were as indifferent as water. Why are your ears so red? Do you have a fever? Feng Ling didn't answer, closed her eyes, and pretended to fall asleep. Seeing that this guy had learned to shut up, Li Nanheng didn't embarrass her. The rain outside the window was still pattering, knocking on the window, making the ward particularly quiet. The boy's breathing gradually stabilized from the beginning, and unexpectedly, he had a good night's sleep. But why were his ears red all the time? Maybe it was really too stuffy in the ward. 3 days later, Feng Ling was discharged from the hospital. When she was discharged, Kay and the others happened to be on a mission, so they passed by the hospital to take a look. Li Nanheng's car was naturally parked downstairs. During the week when Feng Ling was hospitalized, Li Nanheng appeared a total of 3 times. The first and second time, he directly stayed in her ward, and the third time, he came to pick up the recovered wounded on behalf of the base. It was actually very stressful to be a glorious wounded in the base, but fortunately, Feng Ling had a good interpersonal relationship in the base. She usually had good grades and was low-key and silent, so this time when she was injured and hospitalized, no one in the base found fault with her or took the opportunity to spread her nonsense. Finally, after getting the doctor's signature, Feng Ling returned to the ward, changed out of the hospital gown, picked up the combat suit, and was about to put it on. She changed her clothes very quickly, and because she knew that she was going to be discharged today, she had already changed into the clothes that she usually wore in the base. She wore a loose sling vest over the chest wrap, which made her look especially like a man, and a loose white t-shirt over the vest. Chapter 830. Just like that, Li Nanheng leaned against the wall by the door and looked thoughtfully at her clothes that she hadn't put on her coat yet. Feng Ling's heart skipped a beat. She instantly rejoiced that she had already prepared a few more measures. Otherwise, Boss Li would definitely see through it. I've been waiting for you downstairs for half an hour. Is it so troublesome to leave the hospital? Do you need me to buy you a set of men's skincare products so that you can clean up from head to toe before coming out? The man glanced at her leisurely. Feng Ling happened to have her back to him and couldn't see his chest. From this angle, she really couldn't see anything. She could only see that the boy was really especially thin. Hearing the man's footsteps seem to be approaching, Feng Ling quickly picked up the black combat uniform and put it on. She quickly pulled up the zipper with one hand and raised her hand to push her short hair back. She looked at the man who had already approached. Boss, we can go now. However, the man had already walked up to her. He lowered his eyes to look at her, pretending to be calm, and then glanced at her ears, which were no longer red. He recalled that her ears had also been red after she fell asleep that night, and he stared at her with a deep gaze for a while. Boss. Feng Ling raised her eyes and lowered her voice. Is there anything else? Li Nanheng glanced at her and his gaze fell on her neckline. The neckline is crooked. Oh. Feng Ling raised her hand to adjust the neckline. When she raised her eyes again, the man had already retracted his gaze and turned to leave. After returning to the base, it was inevitable that she would be greeted by a group of base members who were close to her. Even Feng Ling herself did not expect that the family of the mayor of Foy State, Mr. Ted, who had gone on the cruise with Xiao Fei to rescue her, had actually come to the base early. When they learned that she had been injured in the rescue incident, they were very grateful and apologetic and brought many gifts for her. At that time, Fengling was in the hospital. According to the rules of 11 base, outsiders were not allowed to visit her, so they sent all the gifts to the base and to her room. Those things included many expensive but very useful electronic products and a military medal that Mayor Ted personally awarded to Fengling. Such things shouldn't be awarded casually, but Mayor Ted made an exception and gave it to Fengling. After Fengling returned to the base, he personally called her and expressed his gratitude. He was also very grateful that she had chosen to throw the child off the cruise. Otherwise, if the child had been injured in the explosion, their family would probably live in pain for the rest of their lives. When Fengling returned to her room, she saw a pile of things on the bed. After receiving a call from Mayor Ted and his wife, she knew what was going on. In this season, Los Angeles gradually became cold. When she returned to the base in the afternoon, the wind was already howling outside. Boss Lee allowed her to rest today and resume training tomorrow, but Fengling still insisted on going to Team 1 to train in the wind and rain. After Kay, Tam, and the other two returned from their mission, she would continue to receive high-intensity sniper training. It rained heavily for several hours. When the training was over, every member ran back to their residence like a drowned rat. As always, Fengling walked back alone. Just as she was about to walk back downstairs, she suddenly felt a weight on her wrist. She turned her eyes abruptly and was stunned when she saw Deputy Drill Master Chow coming over with an umbrella. Before she spoke, she was suddenly dragged into the corridor by Xiao Fei. After entering, Xiao Fei threw the umbrella aside and looked at Fengling, who was soaked. He looked her up and down and then his eyes fell on her face. "Are you all right? Are you all right?" Seeing the worry in Xiao Fei's eyes, Fengling almost forgot that her secret had been discovered by him. Her face remained unchanged and she just looked at the young and handsome man in front of her. "Thank you for your concern, Deputy Drillmaster Chow. I just inhaled some thick smoke. After a few days of treatment, I'm fine." "No matter how fine you are, you can't work so hard. Do you really think you are a man? You just left the hospital and went out to train in the heavy rain. The sniper team has no training schedule today, but you went to Team 1 to find Han Jin. He is a big man who doesn't know how to be flexible at all. Why did he let you train when you said you wanted to train? Can't he let you come back to rest?" "Deputy Drillmaster Chow, I'm a member of the base. I've missed so many days of training, and the strength of my limbs will definitely be greatly affected. If I miss one day of training, it will only affect the time when I can really pick up a sniper rifle in the future. I'm responsible for myself. Drillmaster Han also knows what I mean, so he asked me to resume training directly. Besides, it's common for me to train in such a heavy rain. I've been in the base for so many years, so I won't be affected just because of this afternoon." And she looked at him seriously. Although her voice was low, it was exceptionally serious. "I am a man." Xiao Fei looked at her for a while and smiled. "Are you still worried that I will tell your secret?" "Don't worry. I believe in Deputy Drillmaster Chow, but I hope that you can treat me as a man like before. In the explosion of the oil tank, I just inhaled the smoke and was not injured by the explosion, nor did I suffer any serious internal or external injuries. I'm already very lucky to be alive. I just hope that I can become more and more stable in the base in the future, so gender doesn't matter to me. If everyone can do it, I can do it too." "Deputy Drillmaster Chow, please forget what happened on the island at that time. I'm just a member of the sniper team and don't need any special treatment." Xiao Fei frowned. "Okay, I won't give you any differential treatment, but you have just been discharged from the hospital. I haven't seen you for a week. You have lost so much weight and went to train in the rain. If you continue to work like this, if you really faint on the training ground one day and are sent to the dressing room to be stripped naked, you won't be able to hide it. You'd better pay more attention to your body. Okay, I will pay attention to it. Thank you, Deputy Drill Master Chiao, for reminding me. Feng Ling looked straight at him, and her attitude was still neither servile nor overbearing. She did not have any sense of guilt because her secret was caught by others. Deputy Drill Master Chiao, it hasn't been long since you joined the sniper team. When did you become so familiar with Feng Ling? You have just been discharged from the hospital and returned to the base. What did Deputy Drill Master Chiao remind you of? Suddenly, a clear and low voice rang outside the door beside them. Chapter 831. As soon as she met Li Nanheng's gaze, Feng Ling took a step back. Her expression didn't change and she greeted indifferently, "Boss." Xiao Fei wasn't sure if Boss Li had heard the conversation between him and Feng Ling. He turned his head to take a look but didn't find any clue from Li Nanheng's expression, so he didn't say anything but explained, "Feng Ling was injured on a rescue mission on the cruise ship with me. I saw her jump into the sea because of the explosion and personally fished her out of the sea. I didn't have time to visit her during the week in the hospital. Seeing that she came back today, I asked her a few questions and reminded her to pay attention to her health during training and not to work so hard." Li Nanheng glanced at Xiao Fei's face indifferently. "Why didn't you go with the members of the sniper team today? Why did you let the 4 members who are still in training go there by themselves? Kay and the other 3 members are very good at shooting. It's enough for them to go on this kind of mission. If the mission is too dangerous, I will definitely go with them." Xiao Fei smiled lightly. "Boss, Feng Ling is also a member of the sniper team. You are unhappy that I didn't go with the other 4 members, but you are unhappy that I care about another member. It's really difficult for me to be an assistant drill master." However, when Xiao Fei said this, he continued to meet Li Nanheng's eyes, only to find that Boss Li's eyes were extremely cold. Compared with the coldness, what made Xiao Fei more nervous was the coldness and ruthlessness in his eyes. Since Xiao Fei entered the base, he knew that Boss Li was not someone to be trifled with, but at this moment, he felt that Boss was really not someone to be trifled with. However, Boss Li was really too concerned about Feng Ling. Did Boss Li also know Feng Ling's secret? Impossible. First of all, Li Nanheng was the person in charge of 11 base. He had responsibilities. If he knew Feng Ling's gender, no matter from which angle, he had to act according to the rules and regulations of the base. It was absolutely impossible for him to let Feng Ling stay here, nor could he rest assured to let her go on all kinds of missions. And if Boss had known that Feng Ling was a girl, he wouldn't have been so merciless as to let her receive all kinds of intensive training, and the intensity of the intensive training was even heavier than that of Kay and the other rough men. Go back to Team 2 if you can't do it. There are plenty of drill masters in the base who are proficient in long guns and sniper rifles, Li Nanheng said mercilessly. All the drill masters in the base were excellent members who had been trained here for many years. They had long been accustomed to Boss Li's merciless and vicious tongue, but they also knew that although Boss's mouth was not pleasant, every time he went out on a mission, he cared about the lives of every member and would never allow anyone to die. Except for his bad temper, everything else was good. Xiao Fei was already used to it. Especially after he joined the sniper team, Boss Li's gaze became more and more unpleasant. Now, Li Nanheng had already approached, and his noble and cold face was only left with an uneasy sense of oppression. "Boss, it's fine that you usually make fun of us, but there are members here. No matter what, you have to give me, the deputy drill master, some face, right?" Xiao Fei stood beside Feng Ling and laughed to save some face for himself. Then he glanced sideways and hinted Feng Ling to leave first. Feng Ling turned around quietly and was about to leave when Li Nanheng suddenly stopped her. "Stop, did I say you can leave?" Feng Ling paused and suddenly turned to look at him. The man walked to her side, leaned over, and his cold breath hit the back of her ear. "When you first returned to the base, you went to Team 1 to look for Han Jin. What did you say at that time?" "I said that I had been delayed in the hospital for so many days, and my limbs felt a little stiff. I needed to resume training immediately. Otherwise, it would affect all aspects of the sniper team in the future," Feng Ling answered calmly. "Did I ask you to take a break this afternoon?" "Yes, boss asked me to rest, but I asked to go back to training." "So you felt wronged when you encountered a rainstorm during training?" "No, I didn't." "If you didn't feel wronged, why would Deputy Drillmaster Chiao bring you here and comfort you? If you feel uncomfortable, shouldn't you tell your boss directly? When did Deputy Drillmaster Chiao become your part-time psychiatrist?" Li Nanheng's voice was light and cold, but Feng Ling clearly felt that this man seemed to be very unhappy. But Feng Ling still heard the meaning behind his words. He was warning her to keep a distance from Chiao Fei in the future. Chiao Fei was the deputy drill master of the sniper team. She didn't have much contact with him except during training. Why did he suddenly remind her to keep a distance? At most, he was saved by Chiao Fei on the island last time, and he was caught talking here today. That's all. Standing by the side, Chiao Fei raised his hand to his lips and coughed. He cleared his throat and said, "Boss, Feng Ling is a member of the sniper team. He was injured right before my eyes. It's only right for me to say a few words of concern." "I don't like hearing your words." Li Nanheng didn't wait for Feng Ling's words but Chiao Fei's. He suddenly smiled, but his eyes were cold. The moment he turned his eyes, it seemed that he could freeze Chiao Fei into a popsicle and insert him into the crack of the wall. You pulled her into the corridor and whispered to her. "You two men, are you concerned about her?" Did he mean to provoke Chiao Fei? Feng Ling looked back at the strange light in the eyes of the two bosses. One was cold and indifferent, and the other was smiling. She immediately shook her wrist that was a little sore from training. The rain outside had already stopped, but she was wet and looked extremely embarrassed. Unlike the young master of the Li family beside her, even though he was wearing the same uniform as everyone else, he still looked noble and luxurious. Just by standing beside her, her aura would make people feel pressured and extremely cold. In addition, Chiao Fei, who always showed a smiling face but was actually not simple, only felt that it would be extremely troublesome if her gender was known by Boss or Chiao Fei. "Boss, Deputy Drillmaster Chiao, I'm still wet. Can you let me go back to take a shower first? Otherwise, if I really catch a cold tomorrow, I'm afraid I'll really faint on the training ground. At that time, I'll lose the face of the sniper team." Feng Ling shook her wrist and raised her hand to press her shoulder. Chapter 832. Feng Ling didn't wait for Boss Li to speak, turned around, and walked upstairs quickly. Li Nanheng looked at the guy who didn't take him seriously at all and watched her back, and his eyes sank into unprecedented darkness. In just 2 minutes, Chiao Fei felt as if a century had passed under Boss Li's eyes. Hearing the footsteps that were gradually getting higher and farther upstairs, he immediately smiled. "Boss, you know my temper. I'm nice to everyone in the base. Feng Ling is now my subordinate. I watch them train every day and more or less have feelings for them. But boss, you're usually not close to anyone. Why are you so special to Feng Ling all of a sudden?" Li Nanheng put his hand in his trouser pocket and asked coldly, "What's special about him? Although Feng Ling does look like a little girl, he is still a man. Boss, don't take pity on him. We are used to being vegetarian in the base. I can understand your loneliness, but Fong Ling is straight. Even if you want to turn him, he may not be willing to accept you. Li Nanheng opened his lips and said, "You think too much." That's good. After all, boss, you are the only heir of the Li family. The elders are all waiting for you to marry a wife and give birth to a great-grandchild or great-granddaughter for them to hold. If you turn gay. Xiao Fei didn't finish his words. He just smiled meaningfully and didn't finish his words. Li Nanheng didn't look at him again, turned and went upstairs with a swish, and strode upstairs. Boss Li and a member of the sniper team lived in this building. Xiao Fei didn't live here, so he had no reason to go upstairs. However, he thought of the way Fong Ling went upstairs without looking back and Fong Ling's indifferent expression in front of Boss Li. Boss probably didn't know that she was a woman. But who was Li Nanheng? He was a cold bystander who seemed to stand outside the secular world. Even if he didn't spend much time with Fong Ling, with Li Nanheng's keenness, it was impossible that he didn't notice or suspect something. After some thought, Xiao Fei picked up his phone and walked out. Fong Ling had just returned to her room. This time, the windows and doors couldn't be locked from the inside. Only the bathroom had a lock, so she entered the bathroom directly. As soon as she took off her clothes, her white body was exposed to the air. She undid the chest wrapping cloth on her body while looking at herself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. After untying the cloth on her chest, she was about to turn around to turn in the hot water when she suddenly heard her phone ring. She picked up her phone and saw a message from Xiao Fei. "Fong Xiaoling, does Boss Li know your secret?" Fong Ling looked at the boy he had specially added in the middle of her name. No matter how she looked at it, it was an eyesore. She stared at the phone screen for a while with a straight face and replied, "He doesn't know." Xiao Fei, that's good. Girls should remember to protect themselves when living with a group of men, especially when you live next door to Boss Li. If you really find it inconvenient, you can apply to move out. I also have a few empty rooms in my building. I can make one for you. Fong Ling, no need. Boss doesn't usually enter my room. Other than the fact that he drank too much, Xiao Fei, are you sure it's safe to live next door to Boss Li? Why did he have an inexplicable feeling that Boss Li would eat Fong Ling up at any moment? Fong Ling, it's very safe. My personal privacy has not been threatened or violated. Thank you for your concern, Deputy Drillmaster Chiao. I'm going to take a shower. See you on the training ground tomorrow. After replying, Fong Ling put the phone aside and turned to take a shower. Receiving such a reply, Xiao Fei didn't know what to say. He wanted to say good night again, but when he saw Fong Ling's words of "Thank you, Deputy Drillmaster Chiao, for your concern," she didn't even call his name directly. It could be seen that although Fong Ling was young, it was clear that she knew what to do in her heart, so she would keep a distance and wouldn't cross the line easily. The sound of the bathroom next door continued. Li Nanheng stood on the balcony of his room and vaguely heard the sound coming from the bathroom next door. He stood with his long legs against the light, his left hand in his trouser pocket, and he was still wearing the combat uniform that he wanted to take off but found it a little cold, so he put it on again. He turned his head to look at the light on the balcony next door, and his deep eyes glowed. After taking a shower, Fong Ling put on her clothes in the bathroom, opened the locked bathroom door, rubbed her wet hair, and walked back to the bed. The pile of gifts sent by Mayor Ted and his family on her bed had not been cleaned up. She put down her hand that had been rubbing her hair and was about to go over to collect those things when she suddenly heard a text message on her cell phone. She thought it was from Xiao Fei, so she didn't rush to read it. After putting those things on the bed one by one on the table and in the cabinet, she picked up her cell phone. She turned on her cell phone and saw the words, "Boss Li." At the same time, there were only two cold words from Boss Li on the screen, "Come over." Feng Ling raised her eyes and turned to look outside. She saw the light on the balcony next door, thought for a moment, put down her cell phone, and turned to walk out. When she arrived next door, she raised her hand and knocked twice on the door. After a few seconds, the door opened. The man's tall and slender figure stood in the door, his sharp eyes scanning her from head to toe. His tone was cold. "What took you so long?" "I was tidying up the things sent by Mr. Ted and his family and didn't have time to look at my cell phone." "Are you interested in those gifts?" As Li Nanheng spoke, he turned and walked in. Feng Ling watched the man's back and followed him in. She didn't answer his previous question and only said, "Boss, did you call me over for something?" The window on Li Nanheng's balcony was open, and there was a thin laptop on the solid wood table by the balcony. The man pointed to the laptop. "I want you to look at something." Hearing this, Feng Ling walked over. The moment she reached the table, her shoulders suddenly sank. The man's strong palm pressed down on her shoulder, asking her to sit down. When Feng Ling raised her head to look at him in surprise, the man pointed to the laptop with his chin. "Open it. The password is 9632. Chapter 833. Take a look at the things inside. There are no women in the base, only a group of rough men, and I don't have any secretaries or assistants around me. These documents usually need a careful, tight-lipped person to sort out. On the one hand, you fit the category of tight-lipped and have strong self-control. On the other hand, you are very serious and meticulous in everything you do. Besides, you live very close to me, so it's convenient for you to sort things out. I'll leave this task to you in the future." The man withdrew his gaze from the computer screen and looked at the boy sitting at the table. After looking at it for a while, Feng Ling found that most of the documents were not particularly secret, but there were indeed some secret documents in the D disk of the computer. Each of these documents required a password, which meant that Boss Lee had to tell the password in person before opening it, so it would not involve the important secrets of the base. She nodded. "Yes, except for training and tasks, as long as I have enough time, I can do it." "Don't you want to ask why I specially asked you to come over to sort out these?" The man glanced at her face. "Boss, since you called me over and told me the password to your computer, it means that you've decided to use me after some consideration. Since you've decided, and you said that I'm tight-lipped, I don't need to ask why. I forgot to mention one of your strengths. Your ability to accept things is really good." Li Nanheng's voice was very light, but with absolute command. "No matter what confidential documents you see, you must keep your mouth shut. Can you do that?" Feng Ling's hands left the computer keyboard, stood up, and turned back to look at the man who was more than a head taller than her. "Don't doubt the people you use. As long as Boss trusts me, I can do it." Feng Ling didn't expect that Boss would stand so close to her. After saying this, she closed her mouth and stood there, not knowing whether to step back or not. The room was also very quiet after her words. Li Nanheng watched the boy who stood up and turned around. The two of them stood very close to each other, so close that when Feng Ling spoke, the faint fragrance of her body and the mint smell of freshly showered and brushed against his neck. His eyes instantly revealed an unknown darkness. After about 4 or 5 seconds, Feng Ling moved the chair that was blocking her and retreated a certain distance. "Boss, do you have anything else to tell me?" Feng Ling said, pointing to the time on the wall. "I have to do balance training in the dormitory at night. I just returned to the base and need to recover bit by bit. If I don't do balance training in the evening, I'm afraid I can't hold on for the whole day training tomorrow." Li Nanheng glanced sideways. "My space is big enough. You can do balance training here. I can also see how your sense of balance is now." Feng Ling glanced at the training cushion placed next to her. Considering that she could do balance training alone in her residence, she just needed to bend her arms and lie prone on the ground for an hour. She didn't think she would be discovered, so she didn't refuse. She walked over, picked up the training cushion, and laid it on the ground. Then she habitually took off her shoes and lay down on her stomach. She kept her whole body balanced, raised her head, and used her elbows and toes as the fulcrum. Her posture was standard, and she could maintain her balance for a long time. She was very confident about this. Li Nanheng glanced at her incredibly white and tender feet and then moved his eyes to her motionless and slender back when she was doing balance training. He walked over and watched her maintain this posture. Right now, Feng Ling was wearing a set of loose black trousers and a loose white t-shirt. This was what she usually wore when she slept, but because she was lying down, the loose clothes drooped down, and it could be clearly seen that Feng Ling's waist was different from that of a man's. Especially since the boy had just showered and came over, his hair was half dry, with a few strands hanging on his cheeks and forehead. Li Nanheng stood on the side. His legs were long and slender, and his side profile was noble. He did not speak, and his eyes were as deep as the abyss. His fingertips slid across the black cell phone he had just picked up, and suddenly, he took a photo of the back of the boy lying prone on the ground. His cell phone was muted, so there was no sound when he took the photo. Feng Ling was doing balance training seriously and did not look back. One was doing the training, and the other stood by and watched. After about half an hour, Feng Ling suddenly paused, stood up, and looked back at the tall man. "Boss, I'll affect your rest if I do the training here. I'd better go back to my room to continue." This kind of balance training was simple, but no matter how many years people had practiced it, as long as it lasted more than 10 minutes, they would sweat all over, and Feng Ling was no exception. Although she had just taken a shower, there was obviously some sweat on her face, and there was also some sweat around her white neck and collarbone. "It does affect my rest. Go back." These cold words immediately liberated Feng Ling. She turned and walked out of his room quickly. It was not until the door was closed by Feng Ling from outside that Li Nanheng looked at the soft cushion on the ground again and closed his eyes. In his mind, the scene of the boy's white toes bending slightly on the soft cushion because of too much force, and the boy's slender back, and a certain feeling began to rise from his lower abdomen, and it was steaming hot. Li Nanheng suddenly opened his eyes and stared at his crotch with an ugly expression. F***ck, it was just a very ordinary balance support movement in his room, and he actually had an erection. At this moment, Nanheng looked at the disobedient little brother in his lower body, which not only did not disappear at all, but also gradually raised up because of a certain image in his mind. In an instant, his eyes became cold and ruthless, and the color was as strong as the deep sea at night, dangerous and low. He was a man, absolutely a straight man. But he actually had an erection in front of a man. The door that had just been closed was suddenly knocked again, and then Feng Ling came in again. She didn't look at his eyes but just stared at the pair of shoes she left on the ground, saying, "Boss, I left my shoes here." She quickly ran over to put them on, and then quickly turned and ran out. Nanheng watched Feng Ling run in with a pair of white and tender little feet, put on her shoes, and went out. He watched Feng Ling's back quickly disappear in front of the door, and then she slammed the door outside. Chapter 834. Feng Ling had just walked out of the door in her shoes when she suddenly heard footsteps approaching in this direction. She subconsciously felt as if her back was burning and couldn't help speeding up to rush back to her room. However, she suddenly heard the sound of the door being locked behind her. Click, Feng Ling paused and couldn't help looking back at the door of Boss Li's room. Did she hear that sound correctly? Did Boss suddenly lock the door from the inside? What did she do to make Boss lock the door in such a short period of time as if he hated her to the core? Just when Feng Ling was confused and didn't know what happened, Nanheng had entered the bathroom with a dark face, slammed the bathroom door, turned on the shower, and took a cold shower in the early autumn rainy night. It wasn't until he had washed himself clean that he walked out with a cold expression on his face. When he was about to take a cigarette, his eyes suddenly fell on the soft cushion on the ground that hadn't been put away. He walked over with a dark look and bent down to put away the soft cushion, but there seemed to be a faint smell of someone on the soft cushion. It was a very, very faint fragrance that he didn't know how to describe. It was an indescribable body fragrance that was usually covered by the smell of shower gel. Damn, how could a man have body fragrance? Nanheng glanced at the soft cushion on the ground again, rolled it up and threw it aside. Then he looked down at his little brother who was about to raise his head again. He pursed his lips coldly, turned around, picked up a box of cigarettes, and walked to the balcony. At night, 11 Base was quiet. The slogans and gunshots that usually sounded on various training grounds had long disappeared at this time. It was so quiet that one could even hear the howling in the mountains and jungles not far away. It had been 3 months since Feng Ling was hospitalized due to injury, and the weather had already entered winter. In order not to affect the stretching of their movements, the members in the base still wore the same black uniforms as in summer during training. They only added a very thick layer of something similar to knee pads on the knees and elbows to prevent frostbite. However, because there was a lot of physical exercise during training, even if the weather was a few degrees below zero, they still sweated all over. Years of exercise made every member very good physical fitness, and they didn't easily catch a cold. Except for the explosion on the cruise ship, Feng Ling had not been sick much, and she had been training hard in the past 3 months after returning to the base. After 3 months of training, she, Kay, and the other 3 had successfully obtained the sniper rifles arranged for them by the base and learned some basic knowledge of how to operate a sniper rifle. Xiao Fei could tell that Feng Ling really wanted to keep her gender a secret. In the beginning, he more or less took special care of her. Later, when Feng Ling clearly expressed her stance, he gradually stopped treating her as special. However, during every sniper training session, he would stand behind the other 4 and even hold their waists. When it came to Feng Ling, he had to maintain an appropriate distance and was not allowed to casually hug her. After all, she was a girl. Although he liked her very much, Feng Ling's character was really too cold, and she kept expressing her attitude. Even if Xiao Fei was moved, he didn't even have a chance to take a step closer to her. More importantly, Boss Lee often inspected by the side, and a casual glance from him could freeze people to death. At 5:30 in the afternoon, there were several gunshots on the training ground in the ice and snow. Feng Ling was the last one to hold a sniper rifle and shoot at the target 300 meters away, but she was also the only one among the 5 people who aimed at the center ring at such a long distance. Seeing that she actually hit the bullseye 300 meters away, Kay put down the sniper rifle in his hand in disbelief and turned to look at Feng Ling. Fuck, not bad. Last time, Deputy Drillmaster Chiao said that many people may not be able to hit the bullseye 300 meters away after getting a sniper rifle for a year. How long have you been holding a sniper rifle? Are you trying to beat the 4 of us with your training results? Feng Ling put down the gun and looked at the bullseye in the distance. It's just a coincidence. If I shoot again, I'll probably miss it. Maldiv *Ker, if I can be as lucky as you in the sniper rifle assessment next month, boss won't have to kick me every time he sees me. Tam sneered and then glanced at Feng Ling's indifferent expression. How on earth did you find such a good target? This is 300 meters, not 100 meters. That's right. When we just got the sniper rifle, Boss Lee, such a strict person, told us to keep calm and not to rush too close, because after more than 100 meters, every 10 meters is equivalent to a very difficult obstacle. However, you easily hit the bullseye 300 meters away. You might as well be the only one in the sniper team. The four of us should go back to Team 1 and play close combat. Kay walked up to Feng Ling with a smile, raised his hand, and patted her shoulder. Come on, shoot again. Anyway, boss is in a meeting today and is not here. I'll take you as my master for the time being. Teach me, how did you find the target so easily? Feng Ling rolled her eyes at him and warned him to take his hand away, but Kay was too familiar with her for so many years. Not only did he not let go of her hand, but he also leaned against her shoulder and signaled her to shoot again. Hurry up. We're all watching. As he spoke, Kay put his arm around the back of Feng Ling's neck and leaned in to say, Boy, you're so thin. I really wonder how you can withstand the explosive force of a sniper rifle. Feng Ling's eyes widened, and her face turned red. Feng Ling was about to speak when suddenly a force came from behind. Kay, who was holding her like a brother, was pulled away. He turned to look at Xiao Fei with a dumbfounded expression and asked blankly, Deputy Drillmaster Xiao. Xiao Fei glanced at him. What did you do just now? Kay thought for a long time but couldn't figure out what he did wrong. Why was he thrown away by the Deputy Drillmaster so vigorously? He looked at the other three who were also stunned, and then at Feng Ling who always looked cold and indifferent. He coughed and turned back to say, Xiao, brother Xiao, I didn't do anything. Chapter 835. Kay was a little speechless. They were all brothers of the same family. They fought together in the mud pit of the training ground. It was normal for them to hug each other. Wasn't it normal for men to put their arms around each other's shoulders? Why did this have anything to do with the image of the sniper team? Usually, Boss Lee didn't like this and was strict with them, so they were used to it. When Boss Lee was here, none of them dared to mess around, but now Deputy Drillmaster Xiao also looked murderous. Xiao Fei didn't look at him again but turned to look at Feng Ling. Feng Ling, come with me. Feng Ling put down the sniper rifle she had just picked up and turned to follow him out without saying a word. When they were a certain distance away from the training ground, Xiao Fei looked around indifferently. Seeing that no one was approaching, he turned his eyes to Feng Ling's face. I remember Kay said that your birthday is in winter, right? Probably in November. Which date? Xiao Fei asked. I'm not sure when I was born. I've told you more than once that I'm an orphan. I don't know much about my infancy. My birthday was decided by someone for me, Feng Ling explained simply. I'm not sure when I was born. Said it in November. Yes. Xiao Fei nodded with a smile. Okay, it's already mid-November. Tomorrow is Saturday, and the training will end earlier in the afternoon. How about I invite you out for dinner? Just take it as a make-up birthday for you. Deputy Drillmaster Xiao, I'm not sure when my birthday is, so I don't think it's necessary. Besides, why don't you? In recent years, many brothers in our base who are popular often go out to eat and drink for 2 days on their birthdays. As for you, you haven't celebrated your birthday for several years. I used to regard you as a careless brat, but now only I know that you are a girl. A girl's mind is more or less sensitive and fragile. If you are ignored for a long time, your heart will become more and more depressed. I think it's better to take you to eat delicious food tomorrow and let you be yourself for a day. It can be regarded as a birthday party with you. Xiao Fei said as he took out a small velvet box from his pocket. I bought you a birthday present last week. It's a pair of white diamond earrings. I didn't pay much attention to your ears before, but I found that you don't even have an ear piercing. Kay and the other men have pierced one ear, but you don't even have an ear piercing. Should I give you this earring or not? If you give it to me, I don't know how you should wear it. If you don't, you are the only girl in the entire base who is suitable to wear this kind of thing. Feng Ling was amused by his tone and gave a rare smile. Even if I have an ear piercing, I can't wear it. You'd better keep it. If you meet any girl you like, just give it to her. I don't need these. The girl you like is right in front of you. Will you meet any girl you like in the future? Xiao Fei stared at her smiling eyes and said directly. Feng Ling didn't understand his words at first, but when she did, the young man in front of her had already raised his eyebrows and smiled at her. Feng Ling, who had received a confession for the first time in her life, was stunned. At this time, her hand was suddenly pulled up by Xiao Fei and he put the velvet box with a pair of white diamond earrings into her palm. Take it. I'm not in a hurry to let you wear it, but you have to accept it. In the future, when you want to become a woman again, remember to wear this on your ears after piercing your ears. Feng Ling abruptly pushed the box back into his hand. I can't take it. Just take it. Xiao Fei's eyes suddenly became a little fierce. It's just a birthday gift. Why are you so reserved? No, Deputy Drill Master Xiao, I have no reason to accept your gift, and I don't intend to change back to a woman. Before he could finish speaking, a figure suddenly approached from the side. Xiao Fei's sharp eyes saw the person approaching, and he quickly retracted his hand, directly grabbing the velvet box that had just been pushed back into his palm. When Han Jin approached, he caught a glimpse of Xiao Fei's calm expression and then glanced at Feng Ling. He didn't know what Feng Ling was thinking with her head down, so he called her. Feng Ling, why are you in a daze? Drill Master Han. Feng Ling looked back and saw him, and her expression became as calm as usual as if nothing had happened just now. Why are you and Xiao Fei pulling each other's arm here? Boss Li asked you to go to his room to get the computer and take the materials to the base conference room to find him. After Han Jin finished speaking, his phone rang. He looked curiously at the thing in Xiao Fei's hand. He didn't see it clearly, so he turned around and walked away while answering the phone. He didn't ask or stay any longer. Seeing that Han Jin had left, Feng Ling took a step back and nodded politely to Xiao Fei, who was about to hand the velvet box to her again. I'll send the materials to Boss Li first. With that, she turned to leave. Hey, Feng. Xiao Fei was about to call her, but he saw that Feng Ling walked away quickly as if her feet were smeared with oil. He just couldn't help but want to celebrate this little girl's birthday and confess his feelings. Why did this Feng Ling seem to be frightened? She had been disguised as a man for too long and had never been confessed to before. Was it too sudden? Did he really scare the little girl? Boss Li's computer was currently only accessible to him and Feng Ling, and only the two of them knew the password. It was actually a very serious matter to go to his room to retrieve the information from the computer. Feng Ling went to get the computer without any distractions, found the information that Boss Li had casually told her last night, and put it on the table. Then she stood up with the computer and went out. She rushed to the base conference room. Several leaders of the base and several military leaders were inside. Feng Ling walked in silently, put down the computer, and was about to leave when Xiao Su, who was sitting next to Li Nanheng, suddenly said, Boss, in fact, Feng Ling is a good candidate. Last time in the hotel box, she dressed up as Boss Li, and she looked quite good. Hearing this, Feng Ling's eyes fell on Xiao Su's face and then turned to Li Nanheng sitting in the center of the conference table. At the same time, everyone in the base conference room turned their eyes to Feng Ling and even looked her up and down. Chapter 836. Because Li Nanheng didn't speak, no one here spoke, but their eyes were still fixed on Feng Ling. Put it down and go back first. As if he hadn't heard Xiao Su's suggestion, Li Nanheng coldly put out the cigarette in his hand and the ashtray on the conference table. Li Nanheng's voice was so cold that Xiao Su, who was sitting on the side, felt that he shouldn't have made this suggestion. He immediately shivered and shrank back without saying anything. However, just as Feng Ling nodded and was about to leave, one of the military leaders suddenly said, "I think he is really suitable for this operation. His name is Feng Ling, right? Previously, when we rescued Mayor Ted and his family, he made a great contribution. Furthermore, our people have seen his skills and agility. He is a very reliable member. Furthermore, based on his figure and appearance, if he were to participate in this operation, it would definitely be much easier." Li Nanheng raised his eyes to look at Feng Ling, who was standing in front of the conference room. His eyes were deep and calm, but there seemed to be a huge whirlpool in them, making it difficult for people to read his mind. However, Feng Ling clearly felt that this mission should not be simple, and Boss Li didn't intend to let her participate in it from the beginning. The U.S. military had gradually become particularly dependent on 11 Base over the years. When they encountered some difficult situations, they would directly turn to 11 Base for help. But if they could come to the base in person, it must not be a simple matter. Another comrade in charge of the military also said, "He is indeed very suitable." The other people at the conference table also nodded one after another, including the other drill masters in the base. Indeed, in the entire base, Feng Ling is indeed the most suitable. After hearing these words, Li Nanheng didn't have any expression. He crossed his legs, leaned back, and raised his eyebrows, like a cold emperor, lazy and noble. So, this kind of mission to sneak into the terrorist base is given to a newcomer who has just entered the base for less than 3 years. And he is a member of the team who has just learned how to pick up a sniper rifle. Xiao Su paused and coughed. He felt that Boss Li had always been very proud of Feng Ling's skills, speed, and other aspects. No matter how strict and sarcastic he was to Feng Ling, he would definitely maintain his dignity in public and would never say a word about Feng Ling. But today, Boss obviously didn't intend to let Feng Ling be in the limelight. It seemed that Boss didn't intend to let Feng Ling participate in this mission at all. The person in charge of the military said, "Mr. Li, what we need now is not only flexibility but also a woman who can absolutely cooperate with us and has the ability to protect herself, but there is no woman in 11 Base, and we can't find a woman who is suitable for this mission. Since this is the base of the terrorists, the most important thing is to dispel their suspicion. We need a person who will never be suspected by them, and Feng Ling absolutely meets the requirements of this mission in terms of body shape and psychological quality. He can definitely disguise as a woman to do this." Hearing this, Li Nanheng's eyes turned cold. Xiao Su immediately said, "In fact, it's not very reliable to pretend to be a woman. I just said it casually. Those terrorists have seen all kinds of women. It's best to find a real woman." As soon as he finished speaking, several drill masters next to him tugged at his sleeves, telling him to shut up quickly and reminding him to look at the faces of the military leaders. Li Nanheng directly closed the computer in front of him, picked up the silver lighter on the side, and played with it casually. From time to time, the crisp sound of the ignition and extinguishment and the small flame seemed to reveal a hint of hostility. The man's slender and well-defined fingers were also cold on the silver lighter. He is not suitable. Li Nanheng tilted his head, and his eyes were very firm. "Change the candidate." No one said a word. Everyone knew that Feng Ling was indeed a very suitable candidate for this operation, but Boss had said it, so no one could say anything more. But the military leader said, "Mr. Li, our operation is to encircle and suppress the terrorists who have threatened the safety of the president for many years. 11 Base is set up here to be ready to sacrifice at any time. Every member of the base knows that there is a possibility of losing his life in a dangerous mission. If Mr. Li cherishes his members and is afraid that they will be in danger, what's the point of setting up this base here?" Li Nanheng threw the lighter in his hand back on the table coldly and asked in a very indifferent voice, "The U.S. military and police forces add up to tens of millions of people. They are fully staffed, but the members of 11 Base have to risk their lives again and again. I also want to ask, what's the point of your existence? You. The military leader's face instantly darkened. He suppressed his anger and said, "This is the order of the higher-ups. In dealing with terrorists, isn't the position of 11 Base in the United Nations as the hardest shield in front? So the people I have carefully cultivated should die in vain." Li Nanheng's eyes were as cold as a cold pool, cold and piercing. "Let me think about this matter for a while. I will make reasonable arrangements before the mission tomorrow." The military leader smiled coldly and turned to look at Feng Ling. "It's time to make contributions to the United Nations." "Feng Ling, I just want you to disguise as a seemingly weak and harmless woman, sneak into a bar run by the terrorist leader in the red light district of Los Angeles to spy on the enemy, cooperate with us to encircle and wipe out their leader, and at the same time overturn their bar and hidden base lair. This kind of thing only requires you to disguise as a woman. It should not be difficult." Feng Ling roughly understood what they were talking about. Now that she heard the words of the military leader, she understood what they were talking about just now. She didn't say anything but turned to look at Li Nanheng. Li Nanheng narrowed his eyes, put one hand on the conference table, and looked at Feng Ling with dark eyes. Just as Feng Ling was about to speak, Li Nanheng said coldly, and his words were piercingly cold. "She is just a newcomer, not suitable for this operation. I will arrange another candidate. There is no need to be so anxious to decide on her directly." At the same time, he looked at her coldly. "Get out. Dash." Chapter 837. The military leader said with a faint smile, "Mr. Li, you have always cooperated with us in these operations, and you have always been serious and thoughtful. The United Nations and the higher-ups have always been very satisfied with 11 Base, but even if 11 Base is a unique existence that we can't afford to offend, there are still people from the United Nations above us. No matter how influential the Li family is, its lifeline is still in the hands of the United Nations. If you delay this operation because of your selfishness, if the higher-ups are unhappy, they may revoke the power of the base or dismiss you, Mr. Li, which is not worth the loss." Li Nanheng was not threatened by these words at all. He said word by word, and his cold eyes could almost freeze people to death. "No matter who is above us, even if it is the king, since 11 Base is in my hands, the arrangement of the mission members is up to me. The military can only assist in the operation and has no right to interfere with any decision made in my base." The military people instantly fell silent, but everyone could feel that the temperature in the conference room of the base could not return to normal. No one dared to look at the military leader and Boss Li. They were really like an iceberg and a cold pond. Feng Ling was not afraid of death, but when she heard the words of the military leader, she probably knew the importance of this mission. She was not stupid. She could tell that Boss Li didn't want her to take risks, but she didn't know why he didn't want her to take risks, so she just said, "If you need me, I'm happy to cooperate with you. As a member of 11 Base, I shoulder the mission of the base. Even if it is a mountain of knives or a sea of fire, I can do it." The pen that Xiao Su had been holding in his hand almost broke. He raised his hand to touch his chin and didn't speak, but he suddenly felt a little sad in his heart. Boss Li was not just protecting Feng Ling's life. Everyone knew that Boss Li had a bad temper, but he was still respected and awed by everyone. As long as it was a member of his base, he clearly remembered every life, unlike those people on the military side who only used 11 Base as a life-saving meat shield and hid behind it. Although they were always at the front, the one standing at the front was always Boss Li himself. Perhaps because of Nanheng's cold eyes, Feng Ling felt a chill in her bones. She said, "Of course, the premise is that Boss Li gives the order. If Boss doesn't give the order, no one in the entire base is qualified to act on their own." Xiao Su faintly raised his eyebrows, thinking, Feng Ling, you still have some desire to live. Otherwise, if you really go against Boss Li in front of the military leader, I'm afraid you won't be able to see tomorrow's sun. Li Nanheng's expression didn't change at all. His voice was cold, and he only said 3 words, get out. After receiving 2 consecutive scram, Feng Ling did not speak anymore and turned to leave. When Feng Ling's figure disappeared from the conference room, the head of the military smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He just said, when 11 Base was established, the older generation really lacked foresight. They should have trained some brave and resourceful women in the base instead of only accepting men. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had to take the risk of dressing up as a woman just to find a man of suitable height and appearance. The military leader paused and then said, of course, if this mission fails or there is any danger, I'm afraid the elders of the Li family will have to take the blame. At the beginning, they were very firm in opposing the idea of letting women enter the base. In this era, there is no difference between men and women. When a woman is smart and powerful, she is no worse than a man. Besides, this kind of mission that requires a seemingly fragile woman to explore the way can really show what a fatal decision the elders of the Li family and the founder of 11 Base made. The Chinese value men over women is also reflected in the elders of the Li family. Li Nanheng glanced at the person in charge of the military and said, since the U.S. military and police value women so much, why can't they even find a qualified woman for this operation? Why do they have to go to 11 Base and disguise themselves as women? The military leader paused and his eyes suddenly turned cold. As far as I know, there are a lot of strong women in the Los Angeles military base. I've seen several women mixed in with the personnel in the previous operations, but they don't seem to be of much use. Since you don't have the stubborn thinking of the older generation, why don't you offer them to us? This is your 11 Base's business. You are responsible for fighting and supporting, and we are only responsible for cooperation. I can't decide the personnel deployment. Since the higher-ups have assigned the mission to you, of course, it's up to you to choose, the military leader said coldly. The king-like man sitting in the middle of the conference table tilted his head, and a cold gleam flashed across his deep black eyes. Since it's up to us to choose, who gave you the right to assign people here just now? Those cowards who hide behind 11 Base for everything are really brave when it comes to fighting back. You. Without waiting for the military director to speak, everyone in the conference room watched the cold and picturesque man pick up the computer on the table with one hand, get up, and walk out. What's going on? Mr. Li has always been very polite to the military. Why does he seem to be very unhappy this time? I don't know. Maybe it's because the military leader dares to provoke us every time he comes. He really thinks that our 11 Base is just following orders and that our boss is easy to deal with. If it weren't for the fact that the elders of the Li family insisted on keeping 11 Base in the United Nations, Boss Li would have already fallen out with them. TSK, these people are really embarrassed. If it weren't for 11 Base, I don't know how many people would have died in so many dangerous missions. Yes, there is an old saying that 2 tigers cannot share a mountain. The U.S. military has long been displeased with 11 Base. After all, most of the power in their hands has been divided up by 11 Base. They gave us so many missions that were obviously fatal, and we did them well without suffering any losses. However, they still asked us for such an operation this time and even gave us such a difficult task. They are really shameless to the extreme. There was a whisper in the base conference room. Chapter 838. It was late at night, and Feng Ling's sleeping time was fixed. At 10 o'clock, she lay down to rest. All of a sudden, her cell phone rang. She took a look at it and saw that it was a message from Xiao Su. He asked her to go downstairs and said he had something to talk to her. Feng Ling turned to look out of the window. The light in the room next door hadn't been turned on all night. She picked up a coat, put it on, and went out. When she went downstairs, Xiao Su was waiting for her outside the door, holding a cigarette that was about to burn out. It seemed that he had been waiting downstairs for a while. "Brother Su." Feng Ling walked over. Xiao Su threw the cigarette but in his hand down, raised his foot to crush it, and said in a low voice, "What do you plan to do about what you heard in the conference room?" "Feng Ling, I don't have any plans. I'll listen to the arrangements of the base. If they want me to go, I'll go." Xiao Su smiled. "You're really straightforward. It's obvious that the military deliberately made things difficult for you, but you're too simple. You don't know the private grievances between the US military and our 11 base." "What grievances?" "When the elders of the Li family were in charge of our 11 base, we were already very powerful and almost threatened the prestige and status of the US military. In the United Nations, we were also a high-profile force. In recent years, under Boss Li's leadership, we have become more and more powerful, and for many years, 11 Base has sent a lot of people to the military and the police. You know very well the training methods of our 11 Base. As long as we can get out of the base, we will definitely attract jealousy, so those who are separated from the base have been secretly ostracized by the military and the police. In recent years, 11 Base has sent out a lot of tasks, big and small, to us. Many tasks that the military can't complete have been assigned to us, causing us to become more and more famous. The purpose of the military is to let 11 Base take the lead and weaken our combat power, but 11 Base has let them down again and again. Now these tasks that the head of the military has arranged for us, although they say it's arranged by the United Nations, in fact, it's also related to their secret tricks. They have been looking for opportunities to catch 11 Base's weakness. The situation of the military being divided up by 11 Base makes them uneasy. Now seeing that the base is getting stronger and stronger, they have more and more bad ideas." Feng Ling listened quietly and didn't speak. "As we said in the conference room, we really need a girl who is agile but looks weak and won't attract the enemy's attention, but there is no suitable candidate in the base. I suddenly said that because I saw you in women's clothes last time and thought that if you disguised as a woman, you would be safe, but I ignored Boss's thoughts. He doesn't want you to take this risk at all. After all, this time the military is here to let the people of 11 Base die. It will be dangerous for anyone to go. Boss doesn't want you to go." Feng Ling raised her eyebrows. "We are all members of the base. We can't refuse the mission. It's the same no matter who goes. Why doesn't Boss want me to take this risk?" Xiao Su's expression changed and he suddenly whispered, "Are you really stupid or pretending to be stupid?" Feng Ling looked at him in confusion. Xiao Su simply leaned close to her and said in a low voice, "Can't you see Boss Li's feelings for you? Which member of the base has he been so concerned about? Boss really attaches great importance to you. To put it bluntly, Boss just likes you." Feng Ling was dumbfounded. "But I am a man. So what? In today's world, gender is no longer an obstacle. Although Boss is very restrained, those of us who often hang around him can see that he definitely has special feelings for you. This time, he won't let you die." After Boss left the conference room, he didn't show up again, but I heard that he is reorganizing the elites in the base. This kind of thing that may cost his life, I guess he still plans to do it himself. Speaking of this, Xiao Su sighed. "The terrorists we are going to deal with this time are all a group of people who are extremely lustful. In my opinion, it's the safest way to use a woman to seduce them. Boss, because of the responsibility of 11 Base and the reputation of the elders of the Li family, can't let you take the risk. He would rather sacrifice himself. I really don't feel at ease, so I came to talk to you." When Feng Ling heard Xiao Su said that Boss Li liked her, her mind was in a mess. When she heard that Boss Li was going to sacrifice himself, she immediately asked in surprise, "Is Boss going to dress up as a woman?" The corner of Xiao Su's mouth twitched. "Do you think such a tall man can't see that he is a man in women's clothes? Do you think everyone is like you? It's really difficult to distinguish a man from a woman when he wears women's clothes." Feng Ling, she paused and then said, "Since 11 Base doesn't have to completely obey the arrangement of the military, can't we communicate with the higher-ups about this kind of mission? Do we have to take the risk? What does the military do? Is it just a decoration watching coldly from the sidelines?" Xiao Su sighed. How can Boss be suppressed by the military, but the base has its mission? 11 Base is the hard work of the elders of the Li family for decades and the lifeblood of the Li family. He will not easily compromise, but he can't let the reputation of 11 Base be ruined by those people. He must do what he should do, even if it may cost his life, but which mission is easy and safe? There is no most dangerous mission, only more dangerous. With that, Xiao Su shook his head again. In fact, I said so much just to tell you that Boss is actually considerate of everyone except himself. In this situation, Feng Ling, although Boss doesn't allow you to participate in the mission, I think you can really play a vital role this time. Whether Boss and the elites in our base can come back safely or not depends on you." Feng Ling nodded and said, "Feng Ling, I don't want you to participate in the mission." Seeing that Feng Ling didn't speak anymore, Xiao Su suddenly turned around, walked into the door, and took out a bag at the bottom of the stairs. "I was afraid it would be too abrupt, so I didn't hold it in my hand. Since I've said so much, I'll give it to you. It's up to you whether to go or not. I'll text you the location of the mission gathering place later." Chapter 839. Feng Ling didn't know what was in the bag. Why did Xiao Su ask her out so mysteriously and specially give it to her? He weighed the bag in his hand and opened it to take a look inside. After seeing what was inside, he immediately closed the bag with a slightly hot face. He then looked at the back of Xiao Su, who had already walked far away, and turned around to go upstairs with the bag. Back in the room, she looked at the bag in her hand again and poured all the things inside on the bed. It was a white dress with a fashionable and beautiful design, and it was a suspender skirt. There was a circle of white translucent lace that looked particularly cute at the bottom of the skirt. More importantly, there was a set of nude women's underwear. The cup of the underwear was at least C cup. It didn't look too big on her body, but it also wasn't small enough to make people suspicious. And a pair of incredibly soft silicone flesh-colored things. To put it simply, he was afraid that she wouldn't look like a woman after putting on clothes, or that she would put too exaggerated water balloons in like last time, so he bought her a pair of silicone fake breasts. Where on earth did Xiao Su go to buy these things? This pair of fake breasts felt so soft and elastic as if they were real. Okay, Feng Ling picked up the pair of fake breasts and looked at it. She pinched it twice in her hand, and it felt so good that she almost blushed. There was a box in the bag that didn't fall out. She took out the box and opened it. She saw a pair of high heels and flesh-colored stockings that looked extremely sexy. Including a waist-length, slightly curly, wavy black wig, the hair looked soft and natural, not fake at all. There seemed to be something at the bottom of the box. Feng Ling touched it with her hand and took out a lipstick, a small box of 3-color eyeshadow, and mascara from a thin layer of paper below. Looking at all the things spread on the bed, Feng Ling, Xiao Su was really a talent to be able to buy so many things. The next day, the tall black Hummer galloped in the area where several helicopters were parked and stopped in the middle. Li Nanheng got out of the car and began to arrange their actions one by one. He picked up the walkie-talkie and explained other matters to the people in the helicopter who could not come out for the time being. Just when they were about to set off after checking the number of people, a black off-road vehicle that the members of 11 Base could drive away in an emergency suddenly came from another direction and stopped steadily 1 meter away from the man in a black uniform and black military boots. Li Nanheng looked at the car that suddenly stopped beside him. There was a protective layer on the window, so he couldn't see the person inside. He just stared at the car and didn't speak immediately. He slowly put down the walkie-talkie in his hand and looked expressionlessly at the car door that was opened at this time. At the moment when Feng Ling stepped out of the car, the elites of the base around all widened their eyes in disbelief, only to see a pair of slender legs wearing slender and sexy little high heels appear in their sight. Then they slowly looked up and saw a slender and graceful girl with waist-length hair, wearing a white dress that looked pure and sexy, standing directly by the car door. This girl's figure was strange to everyone, but the face with light makeup and even a thin layer of lipstick shocked everyone. It was Feng Ling. Feng Ling was dressed as a girl, and when she got out of the car and closed the door, she was charming and handsome, and then she threw the car key into Li Nanheng's arms. At the moment when the man instinctively caught the electronic car key, she smiled at him. "Boss, if I don't come, won't it be a waste of the combat power of the elites of the base?" After about 5 seconds, Li Nanheng finally spat out a few words. "Who asked you to come here?" Feng Ling smiled. "Yesterday, I heard it clearly in the conference room. The best strategy for this operation is to find someone to dress up as a woman and sneak into the bars run by terrorists at night to wait for an opportunity to act. Although it is really difficult for a man to dress up as a woman, as a member of the base, I can't absolve myself from the blame. Boss, please don't ask me to go back with the reason that I am a newcomer. I am a member of the base, and I will die as the soul of the base. It's not my style to be a coward. Anyway, it's not the first time that I've dressed up, but this time I just put on a pair of silicone fake breasts. It's okay." After speaking, Feng Ling deliberately straightened her waist and raised her hand to make a gesture in front of her chest. She didn't need the pair of fake breasts that Xiao Su bought for her at all. She just needed to untie the chest wrapping cloth, and the C-cup underwear would be just right for her. But in order not to arouse suspicion, she raised her hand and simply rubbed and pinched her chest. To be honest, now this thing made of silicone is more real than the real one. Wasn't it more real than the real one? A group of elites of the base standing nearby watched Feng Ling rubbing her chest, and their mouths went dry. This was too real, and this body proportion. Was Feng Ling really a man? Li Nanheng also heard what she said and looked at her movements. "Even if you are willing to sacrifice your face for the base and are willing to dress up as a woman, I don't seem to have assigned you a task. Who gave you the courage to disobey the orders of your superior and act on your own initiative during a mission?" At this moment, the man's tone was completely that of a superior, and there was not the slightest bit of warmth. Feng Ling approached him until she stood in front of the man. The faint fragrance of the girl, or the boy's, body spread into the man's nose again. He quietly glanced at her clothes that didn't seem out of place. At such a close distance, he couldn't see which part of her body looked fake. Instead, only a thin black hair clip in her hair betrayed her. He could tell that this long hair was fake, but the rest was really terrifying. "Boss Li, you also know that when I was hospitalized, I had already familiarized myself with all the rules and regulations of the base. I know the price of acting on my own initiative, but now, the mission is ahead. After all of us safely return, boss can punish me. I will definitely bear all the consequences and will definitely not find any excuse for myself." Feng Ling stood in front of the man and curved her pink and tender lips. She stood very, very close to him, and her voice was clear and clean. It seemed that because of this dress, even her voice sounded almost like a girl's, making one's body go soft. Because of her approach, Li Nanheng quietly watched her face, his gaze inadvertently swept over her chest, and slowly narrowed his eyes. Chapter 840. Because of her approach, Li Nanheng looked at her face calmly, glanced at her chest inadvertently, and slowly narrowed his eyes. Fake. Feng Ling was wearing a white suspenders skirt. When she put on this skirt after changing into her underwear, she found that the cleavage on her chest was too obvious. At a glance, she knew it was not fake, so she added a tight-fitting suspenders inside to cover it a little. However, looking from top to bottom, it still looked very real. It didn't look like a pair of silicone gels had been added to a flat chest at all. She smiled. "Boss, do you want to poke it with your hand to see if it really feels so real?" Li Nanheng glanced at her face and looked at her eyes that were not timid but shining. He looked away expressionlessly and didn't touch it. He just threw the electronic car key back into her arms. "Go back to the base." The man was tall and his tone was heavy. Because the girl in front of him looked very thin and petite, such a visual contrast made him even more imposing. Feng Ling placed the key in her hand and played with it casually. Her voice was so low that only he could hear her. "I've already made such a big sacrifice. Boss, do you want to treat me like a piece of trash and drive me back to the base in public? Everyone knows that if I participate in this matter, the problem will be much simpler. It's better to use wits than force. Who says that I will really die if I sneak into a bar dressed like this?" Li Nanheng didn't move but just stood there, looking at the girl in front of him. The group of people waited by the side. They felt that there seemed to be something in Boss's eyes when he looked at the girl, Feng Ling, but it seemed that he had been restraining something. When they wanted to take a closer look, they found that Boss Li's expression was only cold and didn't look like what they thought. "You're not going back." Li Nanheng looked at her firm face and asked coldly, "Do you know what kind of experience you will face if you sneak into that kind of bar dressed like this?" Feng Ling paused and her eyes flickered. "Anyway, I am a man. What kind of experience can I face? I'll just adapt to the situation." Hearing this, Li Nanheng's cold eyes suddenly lit up with a terrible flame. "If you don't have full confidence, you don't have to go. If you go, you will drag everyone down. You'd better not go." "I won't drag anyone down. Once I find the situation is not good, I will find a way to protect myself as soon as possible. Of course, if I can't protect myself." Feng Ling stared into his eyes. "I know the rules of 11 base. I would rather die than be humiliated. Even if I die with them, I won't be suppressed by them and become your burden. Boss, you can rest assured." Seeing that she was too determined, Li Nanheng looked at her face with light makeup and her lips that looked even more pink because of the thin lipstick. He reached out to pinch her chin, carefully looked at her face, and slowly said, almost biting his words, "You look like this now. Fortunately, you are a man in your bones. Otherwise, I would definitely let you have a taste." Before he finished speaking, he paused when he saw Feng Ling's exposed white shoulders in the suspenders dress. Feng Ling didn't understand what he meant. "Taste what? Taste what?" Of course, let Feng Ling taste the consequences of disobeying orders. If it was a man, he would punish him until he cried on the training ground. If it was a woman, he would punish her until she cried on the bed. Li Nanheng looked away expressionlessly and said coldly, "Today's mission can only be successful. You don't have to die with them. Everyone must return to the base safely." Seeing that he allowed her to go with him, Feng Ling immediately smiled, raised her hand, and gave a standard salute of 11 base. "Got it." Looking at the girl in front of him, who seemed to be delicate and charming, with a bit of a heroic spirit that other women didn't have, and looking at the flower-like smile on the girl's face, Li Nanheng suddenly noticed the wolf-like eyes around him. He turned to see that the elites of the base were staring at Feng Ling's figure and bare shoulders, and he glanced at her coldly. "Is your uniform in the car? Take it off and put it on." It was a cold and commanding tone. "I didn't bring my uniform. Didn't I dress up as a woman? In order to make it more realistic and not arouse the enemy's suspicion, I don't even have a gun on me. How could I bring my uniform out?" Li Nanheng's gaze gradually turned cold. He abruptly took off his black uniform jacket and forcibly put it on her back. Then, as though he was only helping her put on the jacket, he pulled her into his arms. Feng Ling was not used to wearing high heels. She staggered forward and leaned into his arms uncontrollably. The tip of her nose bumped into his strong chest through the black t-shirt. The faint cool scent of the man's body, mixed with the unique minty scent of tobacco, instantly lingered in her nose. Feng Ling stiffened and didn't move. Feeling the strength of the man when he helped her put on the jacket and his breath on her head, her ears kept echoing with Xiao Su's words. "Can't you see Boss Li's feelings for you? Has he ever cared so much about any member of the base? Boss really values you. To put it bluntly, Boss just likes you, Boss likes you." Feng Ling couldn't help glancing up. At this moment, Li Nanheng helped her zip up the incredibly large uniform, pushed her forward, and said coldly, "Get in the car." The car Feng Ling drove was not suitable for the mission site, so she could only follow their car or helicopter. She quickly came back to herself, nodded, and turned to get into the black Hummer next to her, Li Nanheng. The elites of the base who were still standing around gossiping, immediately withdrew their gossipy expressions when they saw Li Nanheng's gaze. They all got ready and quickly boarded the helicopter, ready to set off. In the car. "Boss, isn't it too obvious to dress like this?" Feng Ling sat in the passenger seat. Probably because she was wearing a skirt, she couldn't sit as casually as usual. She sat there with her legs together, looking more like a little girl. Li Nanheng glanced at her lightly. "Take it off after we arrive at the mission site." "Who bought you a skirt? Why are you so exposed? Do you need to show so much when you're dressed as a woman?" Feng Ling. "Maybe it's to look more real." Chapter 841. Real. It was really King real. If it weren't for the fact that he had something to do, when he saw Feng Ling dressed like this in such an unguarded situation, he would definitely get hard again in front of her. Feng Ling didn't look at Li Nanheng who was driving. She usually wore such a black uniform, but she had never worn anyone else's uniform. She really didn't expect that Boss Li's uniform would be so big on her now. She felt that this uniform was so big that it could directly cover her buttocks, and the cuffs had to be rolled up several times to show her hands. She was like a child who stole adults' clothes. She rolled up her sleeves as she said, "When we arrive at the destination, I'd like to ask Boss to give me a few pointers about tonight's mission. I suddenly cut in the middle of the queue, so I don't know the specifics. You have to tell me exactly what to do when the time comes." As she spoke, Feng Ling had already rolled up her sleeves, but the cuffs were also very wide. When she spoke, she raised her hands, and the wide cuffs swayed. Her fair and tender arms directly shook the man's eyes. "What?" The man directly looked away, no longer looking at her, and drove expressionlessly. Feng Ling's task sounded very simple, but in fact, once it was exposed, she would instantly die in the bar. She needed to pretend to be a barmaid in the bar, accompany the leaders of the terrorists to drink in the private room at night, inquire about their plans, and at the same time be prepared to cooperate with them from both inside and outside, waiting for the opportunity to directly kill their leader or directly capture him. For the sake of her safety, Li Nanheng didn't let her capture the terrorist leader alone inside, but only asked her to be prepared to protect herself and cooperate with them from both inside and outside. However, Feng Ling was more or less aware of the nature of this mission. If she could get the best opportunity, it would be better to capture the leader of this terrorist group alive. In this way, she could get more information from him, which would be of great help to either side. Before sneaking into the bar, the base had arranged in advance the only spy in the bar, because this kind of place seemed to be open to the public, but in fact, some of the private rooms inside were not accessible to any hostess, and not everyone could casually sit next to those people and listen to them. Without the cooperation and arrangement of the spy inside, she couldn't get in at all. The spy arranged by 11 base inside was a very fair-looking bartender about 20 years old. He looked very simple, but he was so agile that even Feng Ling was a little surprised, and he reacted very quickly to any situation. In less than half an hour, he successfully brought Feng Ling into the bar, avoided everyone's sight, and didn't arouse anyone's suspicion. Feng Ling didn't need to change her clothes. She only needed to put on a thicker lipstick. When the bartender saw her overly plain appearance, he said that although she looked like a woman, none of the hostesses here would be so plain. Thus, he found a small gold necklace and some good-looking bracelets for her to wear. Feng Ling didn't know where to put them on, but she didn't know why. After Feng Ling put on the bracelets, the bartender directly made an okay gesture to her. Obviously, her current dress looked quite foolproof. Before entering the private room, Feng Ling had already known that the primary targets of today's task were the two most important leaders of this group of terrorists. One of them had a very easy-to-remember and common name, named David, who was a black African, and the other was named Paul, who was Russian. David was the real boss, but Paul was a very sharp person. He was equivalent to the most powerful strategist around the boss, and he was the one that needed to be guarded against and treated with caution the most. The rest of the terrorists present came from all over the world, but most of them communicated with each other in English, but there might be some secret codes that others couldn't understand. Feng Ling needed to distinguish the meaning of those secret codes by herself, so that she could cooperate with the people of 11 base outside. After getting all the information, it happened to be the time when the group of people arrived at the bar to talk in the evening. At 8:30 p.m. many people came into the bar one after another. Feng Ling sat at the bar counter, holding a goblet in her hand. It seemed to be wine, but in fact, it was a fruit wine with a very low alcohol content made by the bartender according to her drinking capacity. However, from a distance, it looked like a very strong whiskey and smelled the same. The lights in the bar shone on everyone randomly. Feng Ling sat in front of the bar casually and seductively, talking and laughing with the people standing inside from time to time. The bartender often appeared beside her at the right time, reminding her who had just come and whether all the people had arrived or not. David was violent and bloody, but he was particularly fond of women. Every time he came to the bar to talk about business, he would specially invite the hostesses arranged by the bar to drink with him. This time was no exception. The manager of the bar had investigated the situation of every hostess here, so he was very reassured. However, the bartender took advantage of the fact that the manager didn't notice and put Feng Ling into the team of those women. Anyway, these women were usually separated and were not allowed to contact in private, so they were not particularly familiar with each other. Feng Ling walked into the private room, and the first thing she saw was that there were more than a dozen people sitting inside, including black, yellow, and white skin. The man sitting in the middle was dark all over and holding a cigar in his mouth. He was the leader of the terrorists, David. She had seen his photo in Boss Lee's card just now and recognized the more important people among them, such as David, Paul, and 2 or 3 other people who could be considered leaders. It was they who bombed a plane in New York half a month ago, attacked a TV station in the United States, broke into the live broadcast room during the live broadcast, and shot the news anchor in front of tens of millions of TV viewers. Then they sat there and announced that they would infiltrate every corner of the United States, and their ultimate goal was the residence of the president. This group of people was very arrogant. But it was undeniable that every group of terrorists derived from the United States, no matter large or small, was very bold, and they were all desperados who didn't care about life and death at all. Chapter 842. When she saw a good empty seat, she walked over. "Are you new here? Don't you know the rules?" Paul saw a young girl in a white dress walking towards a less crowded area after entering the door. He immediately looked in her direction suspiciously. Feng Ling turned to look at him, lowered her head, and stood there with an uneasy expression. "Come sit here." Paul patted a very narrow empty seat next to him. Feng Ling walked over without hesitation. When she walked up to him and was about to sit next to him, her wrist suddenly tightened. The yellow-haired man sitting on the sofa looked frighteningly thin but shrewd and decisive, directly pulled her onto his lap. As soon as Paul sat on his lap, the expression on her face didn't change. When he was about to lift her chin to take a closer look, she quickly reached out to pick up the wine glass on the coffee table, poured a glass of wine, and fed it to his mouth, saying coquettishly, "Sir, drink." The warm and fragrant jade in his arms and this coquettish voice instantly made Paul's bones soften. Earlier, he was a little suspicious, but when she sat down, the natural fragrance emitted by the girl's body and her attractive figure made Paul not do anything particularly sharp. He just drank the wine in her hand and then held her white and tender little hand to rub it. Feng Ling maintained a smile on her face. However, when Paul touched the two thin calluses on her palm, which were slightly worn out because of years of training to hold a gun, he immediately glanced at her eyes, pinched her hand, and said with a smile, "Such a beautiful and delicate beauty, why do such things grow in your hands?" Feng Ling didn't panic at all. "Sir, because my family is poor, I have been helping my parents with housework and going out to do business since I was a child. My hands have touched too many things, so they have thin calluses. If my family is rich, why would I run out to be a bartender? Sir, you won't despise me because of my hands, will you? If my family is rich, who will come out to drink every night?" "Really?" Paul looked at her smiling eyes and stroked her soft and slender waist through her white dress. When he almost touched her chest, the smile on Feng Ling's face did not diminish at all. Before his hand touched her, she turned to pour a glass of wine, dodged his hand, and fed it to his mouth. After feeding him a few glasses, Paul was not drunk at all. Instead, he asked Feng Ling to drink as well. He even asked the waiter to bring in several kinds of stronger alcohol. Every time he opened a bottle, he poured a glass for Feng Ling to taste. Feng Ling rarely drank, so her alcohol tolerance was naturally low. 1 or 2 glasses of this kind of wine were enough to knock her out. After she reluctantly drank a few glasses, her face was already red, but since she was a bartender, she would definitely be suspected if her alcohol tolerance was too low. She took the opportunity to walk away from Paul's lap and sit next to him. While they were sitting in the private room talking, she tried to shake off the feeling of drunkenness and remembered all the contents of their conversation in her heart. About 40 minutes later, Feng Ling's brain could hardly maintain such a sober state. When David and Paul talked about an important topic, Paul suddenly thought of her. He poured a glass of wine and handed it to her. "Come on, have another glass." Feng Ling looked at the glass of wine with her sober eyes, hesitated when she put it to her mouth, and only took a sip before putting down the glass. "I want to go to the bathroom first," she said. Paul didn't stop her and looked at her. "Okay, I also want to go to the men's bathroom and the women's bathroom. After all, it's on the way. Shall I accompany you?" Feng Ling nodded shyly, got up, and walked out. Walking side by side with Paul in the dimly lit corridor of the bar, Song Yunxuan's pace seemed steady, but she was still a little unsteady. When they finally arrived at the door of the washroom, Song Yunxian hurriedly entered the ladies' washroom before Paul turned around to tell her anything. After finding a small cubicle, she quickly took out the hangover medicine that the bartender had prepared for her from the small leather bag that she had prepared temporarily. Without any water, she directly stuffed it into her mouth and swallowed it. Then, after standing in the room for 2 minutes, Feng Ling closed the small leather bag in her hand, turned around, and was about to open the door to go out, but her hand holding the door handle paused at this moment. Although she couldn't hear clearly, she vaguely felt that the atmosphere in the women's bathroom was a bit subtle. The effect of the antidote was not so fast, but at this moment, her heart was much calmer. She heard that Paul was a very smart person, but his martial arts skills were very ordinary. After calming down for a few seconds, she suddenly pushed the door open. Sure enough, as soon as she opened the door, she saw a black muzzle pointing at her head. She looked at Paul in panic and confusion at first, who was holding a gun in front of her. Although she tried to explain, Paul didn't intend to let her go. At the moment he pulled the trigger, Feng Ling, who lowered her head in fear, suddenly had a flash in her eyes. She kicked him hard on his knee at an unexpected speed, and with the advantage of her high-heeled shoes, she raised her foot and kicked him in the face when he fell to the ground. After kicking him into the cubicle of the bathroom, she grabbed his arm, bent it back hard, and knocked his head hard. Before he had time to struggle, she snatched the gun. She guessed that this gun couldn't be a silencer gun, so she couldn't shoot it here. She knocked Paul out with a chop, hid the gun in her skirt, and turned to walk out of the bathroom quickly. Tonight's action couldn't be delayed. Since Paul had already suspected her, it meant that others might have also suspected her. At the moment when Feng Ling rushed out of the bathroom, she seemed to hear a large number of people approaching in the distance. She paused, turned her eyes abruptly, and saw a man coming from another direction. Boss Li. Wasn't he supposed to be waiting for backup outside? Why did he suddenly break in alone? Li Nanheng walked closer from the other side of the corridor. He had changed his clothes, and his shirt was half open. His black hair was like the arrogant ink-colored night, and his coldness made her heart instantly safe. However, as the footsteps of a large number of people approached, Feng Ling looked around and saw the place where Paul had fainted behind her. She was annoyed that there was no more suitable place to hide and avoid suspicion, but the man who had approached had already come up to her. Before she could react, he stretched out his long arm and took her into his arms. Feng Ling felt her waist tighten, and the next moment, she was quickly pressed against the wall next to the bathroom by the man, completely blocking her figure. She didn't understand what Boss Li was going to do. She opened her mouth to ask in a low voice, but the man in front of her suddenly bowed his head. She didn't know if it was because the antidote hadn't worked yet, but the man's strong aura made her a little dizzy. Then Li Nanheng lowered his head and suddenly kissed her. Dash. Chapter 843. The man suddenly lowered his head. Feng Ling's eyes suddenly widened, and her lips felt numb. The unhesitant, almost domineering kiss made Feng Ling stiffen, and she pressed her hands against the cold wall behind her. However, the man in front of her took advantage of the moment when she was absent-minded, opened her teeth, and fiercely kissed her. She was stimulated by the intense kiss and trembled. She subconsciously raised her hands to push him away, but the man hugged her even tighter and pressed her against the wall even more fiercely. There was no gap between their bodies, and in an instant, all her breath was taken away. After about 10 seconds, the footsteps of those people were getting closer and closer. Feng Ling raised her eyes to look at the man who was close to her and whose breath was entwined with hers. The expression on Li Nanheng's face did not change. Feng Ling was still sober, but because of his sudden kiss, she panicked. Without giving her any time to think, he held half of her face with his strong palms, bent down, and continued to kiss her more deeply. Those footsteps were getting closer and closer. At this time, Li Nanheng warned her with his eyes to cooperate and not to move. Feng Ling didn't expect that he would come to support her alone in this way. Of course, she didn't move. After all, she was still sober, but her whole body seemed to be almost out of her control at this moment. As her lips were tightly pressed against the man's warm and soft lips, and when they went deeper, they almost touched each other. She felt as if a basin of hot water had been poured over her head, from the top of her head to her limbs to the tip of her toes. There was no place that was not boiling. And her hands, which were pressed against the wall, seemed to be numb and unable to move at all. David and the others are still in the private room. The footsteps had come behind Li Nanheng. Several terrorists who had just rushed back from outside glanced fiercely at the people who were dancing crazily on the dance floor of the bar behind them. They were about to walk to the private room when they suddenly saw a man and a woman kissing at the door of the bathroom in front of the corridor. From this angle, they could only see that the woman who was pressed against the wall was very slender, as if she was completely pressed there and kissed by the man, and the man in the half-open black shirt was tall and straight, making people couldn't help but look at him. He should still be there. The time we agreed on was 8:30. He's almost an hour late now. He's probably still waiting for us to plan our deployment for this week. Another person whispered in the crowd, the bar's business has been particularly good recently. There are too many people coming and going. We still have to be careful and not let anyone see through us. They are all trash who run to the bar to drink and pick up girls. At most, they are all kinds of hooligans. Why do we need to guard against them? The man in the lead said as he walked quickly behind the people who were kissing by the wall. The dozen people behind him couldn't help but glance at the man and woman by the wall. At the moment when the eyes of the group of people fell in their direction, Li Nanheng's hand directly peeled off the shoulder strap on Feng Ling's shoulder, but he still pressed her against the wall very tightly. Although the important part of the girl's half-naked shoulder could not be seen, people could instantly see the charming fragrance between the two people by the wall, as if the two people were really trapped in kissing and passion, making people unable to see any stiffness or flaws. When almost everyone passing by behind looked carefully at Li Nanheng's back, Feng Ling finally understood. She raised her stiff hand that was pressed against the wall, reached forward, and hugged the man's waist tightly. At the same time, as if she couldn't help but pull the corner of his shirt under his belt, her hand also reached inside the man's shirt, randomly groping the man's perfect and strong abdomen and back. Young people nowadays are really open in the bar. Are they going to *CK people outside the bathroom? Ha ha ha, if it weren't for the fact that we're in a hurry, I think we could stand here for a few more minutes to watch the live broadcast. The group of people behind laughed and passed by. They didn't see any guns, knives, or suspicious objects on the two of them. Instead, it made their blood boil. They directly withdrew their gaze from them and did not pay attention to the open door of the women's bathroom. They chatted and laughed as they passed by. Although there were some thin calluses on Feng Ling's palm due to holding a gun for a long time, the girl's exceptionally soft, white, and tender little hand was still different from that of a man. The deliberate touch on the man's body was different from the usual fighting during training. It was incredibly soft. The purpose was to help her divert the attention of those terrorists. After all, there was no other safer hiding place here, but the touch on her waist made Li Nanheng's kiss, which was originally just for others to see, deepen uncontrollably. The soft and slender body in his arms could only obediently cooperate because she didn't know what he was going to do next. He took the opportunity to firmly open her teeth, hooked Feng Ling's tongue, and kissed her fiercely. Even his spurting breath became more and more uncontrollable with this kiss. His breathing became heavier and heavier, and his hand almost broke Feng Ling's waist in an instant. He held her tightly in his arms and leaned down to kiss her fiercely. Although she had heard the footsteps of the group of people walking away, Feng Ling immediately moved her hand away from Li Nanheng's waist and pressed it back against the wall. She didn't dare to move at first, but the man still didn't let her go after so long. She looked at him in confusion with her somewhat blurred and half-sober eyes. She wanted to speak, but her lips were covered by the man's. The kiss gradually deepened, and she felt pain and numbness on her lips. Feng Ling opened her mouth to speak, but the man took the opportunity to enter her mouth as if to swallow everything in her mouth. After confirming that those people had turned into the private room on the other side of the corridor, the other group of people inside would definitely be suspicious if they didn't see Paul return after such a long time. Feng Ling hurriedly raised her hand to push Li Nanheng away, but the man pressed her deeper against the wall, held her waist tighter, and kissed her lips harder. The feeling of being swallowed alive by a man almost instantly made Feng Ling shiver all over. She subconsciously wanted to push him away, but the man directly sucked on her lips as if punishing her. In an instant, she felt that her lips were about to swell. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.